Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Anime Library. My crew is stronger than the plot armor part 1. When Rayleigh opened his eyes, he found himself in the world of One Piece. To make matters worse, a coffin ship drifted by at that moment, and Raylan's eyes met those of a man squatting beside it, defecating. Fortunately, Raylan has the golden finger that's standard for time travelers. This gave him the ability to summon companions. But Raylan discovered that the companion he had summoned seemed to be a little too powerful. I'm a hero who does it for fun. Saitama benevolence and morality are also a luxury. Yasuo festivals filled with flowers are for remembering the dead, but I would rather be forgotten. Yan harmony is nothing but a self-deceiving thought of the weak. Hades, you are strong, but compared to my two old friends from the forest, you are still slightly inferior. Shi Chang. This world is terrible. But thankfully, this world is wonderful enough. Chapter 1, Seeing Hawkeye pooping at the start. Click and enter 2026. Get rich to receive 1 transmigration chance. P.S. I never used to believe in these things until I saw Hawkeye pooping with my own eyes. Brain storage area. P.S. Please use your brain where it is actually needed. One Piece World. East Blue. The wind of the East Blue always carried the fresh scent of citrus and wooden barrels. The tips of the gull's wings swept across the cobalt blue surface of the sea, trailing sunset-colored wakes in the evening. On the calm surface of the sea, a swirling iridescent orb of light suddenly appeared. A small wooden boat fell out of this orb, landing miraculously and steadily upon the sea. Lying on this small wooden boat was a young man, about 17 or 18 years old. With sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, he was dashing and handsome. Anyone who saw this face couldn't help but offer a word of praise. What an aggressively handsome guy! After the small boat and the person landed steadily on the sea, the orb instantly condensed into a tiny point of light, shooting between the young man's eyebrows. A direct hit to the soul. Arg! The moment the point of light vanished into his forehead, the young man suddenly let out a cry of pain and sat bolt upright. Where am I? After the young man opened his eyes and looked at the endless sea around him, seeing himself on a small wooden boat, his face was filled with extreme astonishment. However, it wasn't the unease or awe of being in a strange place, but an uncontrollable wild joy. I'm not dead. Does that mean I've transmigrated? Luluan never dreamed that he could actually be like the protagonists in the novels he usually read, transmigrating to another world after death. It seemed that this hitting the jackpot thing really did have some truth to it. It truly gave him a chance to transmigrate. He just didn't know where he had transmigrated to yet. The azure sea stretched endlessly in all directions, and the sky looked completely unpolluted, with clusters of white clouds that were stunningly beautiful. Currently, he was on an exquisite small wooden boat. His clothes had also changed into coarse hemp garments and shorts, looking somewhat like medieval attire. Where have I ended up? Just as Luluan was surveying his surroundings and wondering where he had arrived, he turned his head and saw something not far away. A small boat, shaped like a coffin, appeared in his field of vision. There were 2 candles on either side of the boat, emitting eerie green flames. The sail was even shaped like a cross. Most importantly, there was a person squatting behind this small coffin boat. Even more coincidentally, when Luluan looked at that small boat, that person was also staring back at Luluan with his yellow eyes, looking at him with a face full of disbelief. The moment he saw that person, Luluan knew he had arrived in the One Piece world. Black hair, yellow eyes, and a short, sexy beard. He wore a black top hat adorned with white fluff, a burgundy-patterned shirt on his upper body along with a black trench coat, white pants, black boots, a cross hanging from his chest, and a long blade strapped to his back. This image was far too familiar to him. The man before him was the One Piece world's greatest swordsman, Dracul Mihawk. However, the current scene was truly too awkward. Because this greatest swordsman of the One Piece world was currently squatting behind his coffin boat, pooping. Plop! As the soft sound of an object falling into the sea reached him, Luluan turned his head away in extreme embarrassment, not wanting to look any longer at the scene that was shattering the image of a powerhouse in his mind. Of course, Luluan didn't dare to look either. Right now, Luluan had only one thought in his head. This time, I'll probably die even faster than when I hit the jackpot, right? Me. Dracul Mihawk. The world's strongest swordsman. The owner of one of the 12 supreme grade sword, the Midoriba Kasanika Choji, known as the world's strongest blackblade Yoru. One of the 7 warlords of the sea. I was originally sailing through this East Blue, known as the weakest sea, searching for traces of red hair. As usual, after confirming no one was around with observation haki, I was relieving myself on the ocean. But who would have thought that while I was in full flow, a ball of light would suddenly and inexplicably appear beside me, and then a boat and a person would just appear out of thin air. That person and I, who was currently relieving myself, made eye contact. The most despairing part was that I was still in full flow. This kind of thing isn't exactly something you can just stop on command. It seems that later, I'll have to make this person, who appeared out of thin air for some reason, vanish into thin air. Hairs standing on end. A chill down his spine. His heart rate suddenly accelerated. A shiver told Luluan that he was likely not far from death. Luluan had watched the One Piece anime quite a bit in his previous life and had been very fond of it at one point, though he had only watched up to the beginning of the Wano Country arc. Most of the later parts he only caught occasionally while scrolling through short videos. He had also read many fanfictions and seen various animations. He knew why the Krieg pirates were so miserable. Luluan still remembered certain memes clearly to this day. But Luluan really didn't expect that right after transmigrating, the meme would actually become reality. Never mind someone as powerful, proud, and somewhat vain as Hawkeye, a refined man with an idol's image to maintain. Even if it were Luluan himself being seen like this, he would have to find a way to take that person out. Oh, heavens! Oh, earth! He really had no interest in peeping at a man pooping. This was all truly a misunderstanding. Who knows why he ended up on such a small boat after transmigrating to this world and witnessed all this? Don't people in this world have observation haki? Couldn't he have gone a bit further away to poop? Sigh. Wait. The Golden Finger. He was the most noble person in the multiverse, a transmigrator from Earth. There's no reason for him to kick the bucket right after arriving in this magnificent world without having experienced anything. After all, this was one of his favorite anime worlds since childhood. Pirates, Marines, though their identities differed, the distinction between good and evil wasn't that clear-cut. There were good people and bad people in every camp. Most importantly, this world was exciting enough. So, come out, system. Ding. The essential system for Earth transmigrators is now online. Detecting the world the host is in. Detecting the host's wishes. Detection complete. Congratulations to the host on the Invincible Explorer system. This system will serve the host's perfect exploration experience journey in the other world. Ding. System. Functions have been customized. The system functions will be divided into 2 major sections. For every 100 million berries spent, you can draw a random exclusive setting for the host once. For every 1 billion berries spent, you can draw a myriad world's character companions once. Ding. At the start, the host is gifted 1 draw for an exclusive setting and 1 draw for a myriad world's character companions. Would the host like to draw? Yes/no. Chapter 2, A Hero for Fun. Draw immediately. As the system's mechanical voice announced. Luluan vaguely heard some movement not far behind him. From the sound of fabric rubbing, Luluan knew that old fellow Hawkeye was about to pull up his pants and act like he didn't know anyone. If he didn't draw right now, he might not get another chance later. Ding. Random setting drawing. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the setting, Overwhelmingly Handsome. Overwhelmingly handsome, a very handsome person who possesses the most domineering and overwhelming aura in this world, with its intensity controllable and easily restrained or released. Ding. Myriad Worlds Character Partner Drawing. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the partner, Saitama. Saitama, a hero for fun, possessing immeasurable strength, with both power and speed at the ceiling. He became the strongest through the Saitama training method. If a powerful opponent capable of rivaling him appears, Saitama will experience intense emotions, and his power will grow exponentially due to those intense emotions. Skills: normal punch, super speed movement, consecutive normal punches, serious side hops, serious punch, and other killer move, serious series. Setting in this world: invincible. The host's setting in the summoned partner's heart, the captain to be protected even at the cost of everything. Saitama. The moment he saw that name, his previously chilled back suddenly became warmer than ever before. Even everything that had just happened lost all its intimidation, making Luluan feel it was somewhat comical and funny. Just now, Luluan had actually been holding it in. He wanted to laugh so badly, but under the pressure from Hawkeye, he hadn't dared to. Now. Ha ha, I knew this coffin boat was so small. How do you usually handle your physiological needs at sea? So it really is like this? Ha 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 ha. Hawkeye had just pulled up his pants. He was still wondering whether to get rid of this thing that had suddenly appeared before him. He hadn't expected to hear the boy's insolent voice from the small boat. Clearly, through observation Haki, he had sensed the boy's nervousness, rapid heartbeat, and terrified behavior. But in the brief moment it took him to pull up his pants, the boy seemed to have completely lost his previous nervousness, even daring to mock him from that boat. Truly ignorant. Hawkeye's amber eyes narrowed, and without any hesitation, he reached out and grasped Yoro on his back, preparing to strike this reckless weakling who knew who he was but still dared to provoke him. But when Hawkeye's right hand gripped the hilt and he was just about to swing his sword, he suddenly felt his hair stand on end. A chill down his spine. His heart rate suddenly accelerated. A shiver told Hawkeye that if he swung this blow, he would likely die instantly. From the time he learned the sword as a child until now, Hawkeye had never had such a terrifying perception of death. It was an absolute warning from his brain and body. Ever since he became the world's strongest swordsman, it had been a long time since Hawkeye had met his match or felt that a powerhouse across from him was invincible. But this time, it had already transcended the scope of combat. It seemed that as soon as he made a move, he would reach the end of life. Hawkeye was dazed. Terrified and dazed for the first time. As a drop of cold sweat slid down his forehead, Hawkeye's yellow pupils suddenly shook. Because next to the boy in his line of sight, someone else had appeared at some point. A bald head like a light bulb, wearing a very tacky yellow jumpsuit with a white cape and red gloves, looking very simple. But it was this person. The moment Hawkeye saw him, his pupils shrank, and he felt as if his heart was about to stop beating. This man before him. So strong. Absolutely the strongest person he had ever seen in his life. Your Excellency, please excuse my behavior. His right hand left the hilt, and Hawkeye responded calmly as he looked at Luluan, who was laughing so hard he couldn't stand straight. The moment his hand left the hilt, Hawkeye felt as if he had come back to life. The suffocating feeling of death vanished instantly. Everything returned to normal. That man just stood there lazily on the boat, staring off into space, seemingly full of openings. But Hawkeye couldn't even bring himself to speak words of challenge. After Luluan finished laughing, looking at the polite Mihawk standing on the coffin boat, he finally caught his breath. He had been so happy just now. He had finally set his mind completely at ease. The joy of drawing Saitama, combined with the absurd scene that had just occurred, made Luluan truly happy for a long time. But while happy, Luluan also truly realized that he had indeed transmigrated, truly arriving in this world. If he hadn't summoned Saitama, he really would have died. The Mihawk before him. Although he was a character he liked in the anime. But standing here in person, Luluan discovered that when this world became reality, it was indeed crueler than he had imagined. The powerful people of this world didn't seem to care much about the lives of ordinary people. In the anime, those civilians might just be a casual stroke of the pen, representing a crowd. A clash between the strong and exploding buildings were grand scenes, but no one would think about how many ordinary people were caught in such magnificent events. After all, that was just an anime. But now, This was the world he was in. A world so real it was somewhat terrifying. For someone like him from a peaceful country, it would indeed take some time to accept and adapt. "Captain, I'm so hungry. Is there anything to eat?" Just as Luluan was looking at Hawkeye and thinking. Suddenly, Saitama, who was beside him, spoke up. "Captain?" After hearing Saitama use this title, Hawkeye felt his heart begin to throb uncontrollably. The boy before him was actually the captain of the powerhouse behind him? But then again, both of these people were existences that seemed extremely weak in his perception and were full of openings. Just now, when he gripped the hilt, that person gave him a suffocating feeling of death, yet that captain continued to laugh without any movement. Looking at it now, it wasn't that the other party had no reaction. It was that the other party had sufficiently strong confidence. Thinking of this, Mihawk's gaze became more and more restrained, losing its usual sharpness and even gaining a hint of humility. Mihawk, how do you usually eat then?" Chapter 3, The Chef, Dracula Mihawk. Oh my god. This sashimi. It's way too delicious. On the small wooden boat. In front of Hawkeye. A fish weighing dozens of pounds was rapidly decomposed into 2 large plates of sashimi under the cold glint of Hawkeye's crossknife. The skin and organs were removed, leaving only the most exquisite parts of the fish meat. It had to be said, Hawkeye truly lived up to his title as the world's strongest swordsman. His speed at making sashimi was incredibly fast. Moreover, the fish in this One Piece world was truly delicious. Luluan used to think the exaggerated scenes of characters eating in the anime were just for comedic effect or because they needed to recover stamina. But after just a small taste of this otherworld fish, Luluan understood. Those exaggerated scenes were justified. Because the ingredients in this other world were countless times more delicious than he had imagined. Sweet, fresh, and fragrant without a hint of fishiness, even without any processing, the flavor surpassed every fish Luluan had eaten in his previous life. With one piece of sashimi in his mouth, Luluan fell into the audience reaction state seen in Lucky Cook or Cooking Master Boy. He felt as if his entire being was swimming in the great ocean, enjoying this feast of fish meat. Clang! Just as Luluan wanted to continue enjoying the delicacy, his chopsticks struck the plate directly. Luluan opened his eyes to see that the full plate of sashimi in front of him had vanished without a trace. Beside him, Saitama's mouth was chewing rapidly, looking exceptionally serious about his meal. "Hey! Saitama! Mr. Mihawk, could you please prepare another portion for us?" Facing Luluan's murderous glare, Saitama didn't make eye contact at all, instead staring intently at Mihawk. His eyes were sparkling with an exceptionally burning gaze. Hawkeye naturally received the message transmitted by that gaze. And so, swish swish swish, delicious. Swish swish swish, Mr. Mihawk, you are absolutely amazing, swish swish swish, the captain is asleep, so I'll eat alone. Mr. Mihawk, I want more, I'm eating very seriously right now. Killer move, serious sashimi eating. As the first ray of morning sunlight fell, Luluan wailed like a ghost for a while on one of the only 2 beds on the small boat, scratched his butt, and then struggled to wake up. Fortunately, although the boat was small, it was fully equipped. It had 2 small rooms with all the necessary living utensils, and even a kitchen, a bathroom, a shower, and so on. Luluan's lifestyle needs could be fully met. Furthermore, perhaps because of the transmigration, Luluan felt his appetite was at least several times larger than before. However, it was still nowhere near as monstrous as Saitama's. That bald guy showed no mercy to the world's strongest swordsman, making him slice fish for an entire afternoon. Maybe even a whole night of fish slices. But surely not all night. The most crucial thing was that Hawkeye didn't dare to resist and had been very obediently listening to Saitama's words. Luluan could tell that Hawkeye had definitely perceived how powerful Saitama was. Otherwise, he wouldn't be serving him so willingly. Besides, if he remembered correctly, Hawkeye did know how to cook, and it seemed his culinary skills were quite good. Moreover, having just arrived in this world, he really needed a guide. Hawkeye seemed like a very good choice indeed. Good morning. Walking onto the deck of the small boat, Luluan greeted the two people who were still slicing and eating fish with full energy. Looking at their state, these two must have been eating from yesterday afternoon until now. Is this scientific? No, wait. This really isn't a scientific world. It seems his mindset was still a bit too traditional. Good morning, Captain. Saitama still had his deadpan face but greeted him quite familiarly. Hawkeye's state was still as elegant as yesterday, still making sashimi with high standards. His meticulous state was as perfect as ever. A fish flew into the air, and Yoru, that magnificent long blade, was like an extension of Hawkeye's arm. It was simply a dual feast for the eyes and the palate. He sat down in yesterday's spot, eating sashimi. Hawkeye's coffin boat was now tied to the side of the small wooden boat, drifting aimlessly across the sea along with it. Hawkeye, you don't have to keep slicing for him. Take a break and eat some yourself. Sir, I am fine. I am not tired. If Excellency Saitama wishes to eat sashimi, I am willing to keep making it for him. Hawkeye's tone was very calm when he said this. There was even a hint of slight pride mixed in. No need to be so formal. It seems you already know his name. He's Saitama, and I'm Luluan. Hello, Excellency Luluan. I am Dracule my hawk. Of course, you may also call me Hawkeye, that is my nickname. Hawkeye even stopped his slicing motion when he heard Luluan introduce himself. Saitama also stopped his serious eating mode and began to enjoy the food slowly. Alright, sit down and eat some too. Very well, Excellency Luluan. The 2 plates of sashimi were enough for them to eat for a long time. Compared to Saitama, their meal could be described as slow and elegant. By the way, Hawkeye, where is this? Are we near Karaigana Island? After coming to this world, even though a night had passed, Luluan really didn't even know where he was. No, Excellency Luluan, this is the East Blue. The East Blue. Luluan couldn't help but be shocked upon hearing Hawkeye's answer. He hadn't expected to arrive directly in the East Blue, and even less expected Hawkeye to appear here. The East Blue was the weakest sea. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be anything to attract Hawkeye here. The only person who could attract Hawkeye to come here voluntarily would be. I came here to find red hair for a duel, to test my newly practiced sword techniques. I didn't expect to encounter you two before finding red hair. Red hair. East Blue. If this was the time when one of the powerful 4 emperors came to the weakest East Blue to give up an arm, then he must have arrived in this world quite early. The protagonist Monkey D. Luffy was at least 10 years away from setting sail. Thinking of this, Luluan confirmed once more. What year is it now? Chapter 4, The Slaughtered Town Lord Luluan. This year is 1522 of the sea calendar. 1522. After hearing Hawkeye's answer, Luluan was quite shocked. Originally, Luluan thought it was still early before Luffy set out to sea, but he didn't expect to arrive directly in the year Luffy set sail. At this time, is red hair in the East Blue? This timing shouldn't match up. However, Hawkeye is in the East Blue. This timing actually does match up. If he remembered correctly, Hawkeye still had to use that small cross on his chest to give the green-haired 3-sword style man a harsh lesson. Right now, Luffy might not have set out yet, or perhaps it's the moment he's just preparing to set sail. Looking at it this way, Hawkeye also possesses the attribute of being somewhat directionally challenged. And over the next few days, Luluan's thought was thoroughly proven. This guy Hawkeye really follows the pure intuition school of sailing. Having eaten sashimi for a whole week, Luluan felt he had eaten more fish in these few days than in his entire previous life combined. Even if the fish in this world were delicious, Luluan was starting to find it a bit much and truly missed life on land. Mr. Hawkeye, I wonder how much longer until we can sail to an island with people. Lord Luluan, according to my guess, we should be able to reach a large island very soon. Hawkeye swung his sword and sliced fish as usual. His tone remained respectful and calm. Luluan always felt that the Hawkeye before him seemed to have already grown accustomed to his daily tasks. Hawkeye had no complaints about this dull and repetitive chef work, and would even show joy at Saitama's praise. Luluan always felt that this Hawkeye was completely different from what he had imagined. Why wasn't there any of that wild and untamable look? Saitama clearly hadn't even made a move yet. An island, it's over there. Captain, do you want to get there faster? Saitama, who was resting nearby after finishing his sashimi, stood up upon hearing Luluan's words and pointed his hand toward the southeast. As he looked in the direction Saitama was pointing, a red arc of light flashed through Hawkeye's eyes. After it vanished in an instant, he looked at the still indifferent Saitama and imperceptibly revealed an extremely solemn expression. Upon hearing Saitama's words, Luluan stood up excitedly and looked in that direction. Then he sat back down, still excited. He couldn't see anything at all. There's no need to go too fast. Hawkeye, just go and speed up a bit. He couldn't help it. Luluan really didn't dare to easily agree to Saitama. Because Luluan wasn't sure if his fragile body could withstand Saitama's rough handling. The getting there faster mentioned by the other party likely meant that he and this small wooden boat would have to pay the price of being shattered to pieces. Compared to Saitama, clearly Hawkeye was more practical for him. So, the Black Blade Knight can actually be used as an oar like this. After Luluan sensed that the boat's speed had significantly increased, he turned his head to look. The current world's greatest swordsman was at the stern of the boat, rowing hard with Knight. Seeing this, a very happy smile immediately spread across Luluan's face. Although the boat's speed had increased, the entire small vessel still sailed very steadily. On the small wooden boat, at the bow, a bald man stood by the side, his plain face seemingly uninterested in anything. On the deck, a handsome guy sat at a small wooden table eating sashimi, his face full of happiness. At the stern, a man dressed most magnificently and elegantly was rowing with an equally magnificent long sword. The scene was incredibly bizarre. After the boat had sailed for about half an hour, Luluan finished his breakfast and came to the bow, curiously peering at the outline of the island that had already appeared in the distance. This was the first time he had seen land since arriving in this world. At this moment, Luluan was truly curious. What kind of place would his first stop in this other world be? However, as the small wooden boat drew closer and the outline of the island became clear, Luluan's original joyful expression suddenly vanished. Instead, his face gradually began to turn serious. Nearing the shore, Luluan could already clearly see that on the distant island, what the waves were pushing ashore were no longer fish and shells, but charred wood and skeletal remains. A row of masts, severed but refusing to fall, each had sun-dried fishing nets hanging from its top. Clinging to the nets were not shimmering fish scales, but dark red, flocculent material. It might have been seaweed, or perhaps something else. The entire coastline was like a living hell. Having grown up in a peaceful country, Luluan had never seen such a scene in his life. After seeing those corpses soaked in seawater, with severed limbs and broken arms, Luluan's face instantly turned pale, and waves of nausea immediately washed over him. After the small wooden boat docked, the group of three disembarked. They walked along the only still recognizable road into the town, which was already in ruins. The slanted houses on both sides stood in bizarre poses. Some roofs were completely ripped off, revealing seawater-bloated corpses inside, along with scattered furniture. In this town, it could be said that almost every household had failed to escape this fate of complete destruction. The entire town was now deathly silent. Walking through the town, Luluan's thoughts were in a constant state of turmoil. When watching anime before, Luluan had seen depictions of villages and towns destroyed by pirates. But those images in the manga, those scenes passed over quickly, were nowhere near as shocking as actually being here in person. Previously, Luluan only felt that this world was full of excitement. But under the surging waves of the era, how many ordinary beings have vanished into obscure corners? No one knows. It's just like the novels he read before, when two great emperors fought, a single thought could cause countless planets to explode and the universe to perish. People only call it exciting, but never consider that if they were in the middle of it, those two would be devils. Standing in the center of the town, for the first time, Luluan gained a clearer understanding and feeling of the world he had transmigrated into. Saitama, standing nearby, no longer looked as plain as before, but his expression was filled with sharp, serious lines. Only Hawkeye's expression remained. unchanged, as if he had long been accustomed to all of this. Yet his unconsciously furrowed brows also revealed a bit of Hawkeye's inner turmoil. The wounds on these people were caused by the fishman race. As Hawkeye's voice trailed off, Saitama spoke slowly, his tone carrying a hint of seriousness that perhaps even he hadn't noticed. The fishman race, people from the undersea world? I actually killed a fishman once. Chapter 5, Hell, my hometown. This should be the Konomi Islands. When Hawkeye mentioned that the wounds on these people were caused by fishmen, Luluan knew. The place he was standing on right now was likely the Konomi Islands, occupied by the Arlong pirates. The Konomi Islands. Located in the northwestern part of the East Blue, they were under the jurisdiction of the Marine 16th Branch and consisted of about 20 villages, including Kokoyashi Village and Gosa Town. After falling under the rule of the Arlong pirates, a ransom system was implemented: 100,000 berries for adults and 50,000 berries for children, along with the forced collection of protection fees. They also built Arlong Park, modeled after Sabayati Park, as their base. Due to their collusion with Colonel Nozumi of the Marine 16th Branch, their crimes had gone unnoticed by Marineford for a long time. This reign of terror had lasted for nearly 8 years. As for which specific village on the island this was, Luluan didn't know. Perhaps in the anime, this village's name was never even mentioned, just an unnoticed corner of the world. But seeing the town filled with the corpses of his fellow humans now, Luluan felt a pang of sorrow, which quickly turned into a surging rage. Only by seeing this hellish scene with his own eyes, could he truly feel the evil that the Arlong pirates had wrought upon this world. Over there, someone is constantly moving the bodies. Following the direction Hawkeye pointed, the group slowly walked over. Peering through the collapsed houses, Luluan saw him. A man in a green uniform with a pinwheel on his head was pulling a cart loaded with mangled corpses toward the woods not far from the town. After following him for a distance, they could see a large pit in the woods. The man was moving the corpses into it. It was clear. The man was struggling with the weight. It was also clear. The man was moving them with grim determination. The three of them stood silently, watching the man struggle with his task. Before Luluan could say a word, Saitama, who was beside him, vanished from the spot. At the moment Saitama disappeared, Hawkeye's frame shuddered as usual. But after a brief moment of daze, Hawkeye also vanished. Luluan then began to walk slowly toward Ajien. This man. Luluan was very familiar with him, after all, that iconic pinwheel was hard to miss. Who are you people? As Saitama and Hawkeye moved the corpses from the village into the pit at a speed the naked eye could barely track, Ajien stood frozen in shock. His face was filled with astonishment. His question wasn't answered until Luluan walked up to him. We are travelers passing through. We don't know what happened here. By the time Luluan finished speaking, Hawkeye and Saitama had finished moving the bodies and had even helped Ajien fill in the pit. The entire village was now buried there. As Luluan approached, he saw a wooden sign standing behind the large pit. On it, written in crooked script, were the words, Shaju Village. This was the name of the destroyed village. While Luluan stared at the wooden grave marker, Ajien watched Saitama and Hawkeye with a wary gaze. Given the blinding speed they had just displayed and the aura they radiated, Ajien knew. These two were definitely not ordinary people. After glancing at Luluan, Ajien spoke. This village was wiped out by the Arlong pirates, who have a bounty of 20 million. This place is now their territory. I suggest you leave immediately. This isn't a place for you. Noble lords to come for sightseeing. With that, Ajien turned and walked away. What Ajien didn't expect, however, was that even after he clearly stated this was the Arlong pirates' territory, the seemingly frail noble young master didn't choose to leave. Instead, he and his two warrior servants followed behind him. Although those two were strong, Ajien knew exactly how terrifyingly powerful the Arlong pirates were. This bald young man and the middle-aged noble butler in his refined attire were clearly no match for those thugs in the Arlong pirates. And being so conspicuous, following him onto the island would surely bring immense trouble upon them. Hey, you lot! Stop following me! Go back to wherever you came from. After walking for a bit, Ajien stopped and spoke to Luluan with extreme gravity. I'm not joking. The Arlong pirates are not someone you can afford to provoke. If you don't want to die, leave this place quickly. Don't set foot on any island in this area, including the one with the marine base. After finishing his warning, Jian looked at Loluan and the others. You noble lords should know that there are some people who are true outlaws. After that, Jian turned around and continued forward. In Jian's mind, these noble lords should have understood that he wasn't lying. However, to Jian's utter disbelief, they didn't listen to him and leave, they continued to follow him as before. They didn't seem to have any intention of leaving at all. Moreover, just as Jian stopped, intending to block them and say more, Loluan's group of 3 simply bypassed him, ignoring him as they walked ahead. Leave the monsters in this place to me. Of course, but I want to test something out as well. Captain, after you're done testing, will there be anything left for me? Trust me, there definitely will be. Lord Loluan, these fishmen are likely renegade crew members of Jinbi, who is a fellow Shichibukai. They are merely small-time characters. The 3 of them walked toward Arlong Park, chatting and laughing. Jian's heart sank to the bottom. These 3 clearly hadn't taken his words to heart. And Jian knew better than anyone what kind of end this would lead to. Over the past few years, it wasn't that no one had come to the Konomi Islands, nor that no one had resisted or tried to uphold justice. But in the end, those kind people, all met the worst possible ends. They faced the most tragic conclusions. These kind people didn't deserve such a fate. Thus, Jian had changed from being moved by the heroic deeds of kind people to suppressing and warning them. Even if he had to speak harshly, even if he made them hate him, he couldn't let these good people set foot on the Konomi Islands. This purgatory. This, beloved hometown of his. Chapter 6, There's actually a marine base here? Wow, what a rich scent of oranges. After passing through a forest and arriving at the other side of the island, a fragrant aroma of oranges drifted gently with the wind, causing Loluan to let out an exclamation of admiration. Since coming to this world, this was the first time he had smelled such a familiar scent. After all, in his previous life, he had never drifted across the ocean in a small wooden boat like this. Loluan had experienced the smell of the sea breeze thoroughly over the past few days. Now, this orange fragrance could be said to have improved his terrible mood quite a bit. Everyone, please, truly do not go any further. The Arlong pirates are no joke. Seeing that the 3 of them still didn't seem to take his words to heart, Jian couldn't help but become anxious. He quickly took a few steps forward, stretched out his hands to block the 3 of them, and shouted somewhat hysterically. Leave this place quickly. After he finished shouting, he took several sharp, heavy breaths. His face was filled with anxiety and terror, and his reddened eyes were full of urgency and worry. Loluan could clearly feel the goodwill radiating from Jian. This pure feeling was completely different from the feeling Hawkeye gave him. Even though Hawkeye was currently following him and even acting as the cook on this small wooden boat, Loluan could feel that his relationship with Hawkeye hadn't actually become closer because of it. Hawkeye's current obedience was perhaps because he had sensed something. But the Jian before him, towards a group of people he was meeting for the first time, could actually act like this. From this, it was evident that Jian was not as sharp as his ferocious appearance or aggressive words suggested, but was instead a person who was warm to the bone. Loluan had felt this way when he watched the anime before. Now, after actual contact, the feeling was even stronger. Don't worry, Jian. The 3 of us might be just a little bit stronger than you imagine. As Loluan said this, he raised his right hand and held his thumb and index finger in front of Jian's eyes, gesturing that little bit of a gap. Sir, how do you know my name? Jian was clearly startled upon hearing Loluan's words. After all, a noble lord like Loluan should have no connection with him at all. Because I was born omniscient, knowing everything in this world. Faced with Jian's question, Loluan just laughed it off, speaking jokingly. He stepped forward very familiarly and put his arm around Jian's shoulder. While leading Jian forward, he also pointed at the 2 people behind him. Those 2, especially that bald one, are the strongest. When Loluan said this, the confidence in his tone was palpable. If anyone else dared to claim to be invincible, Hawkeye would definitely scoff. After all, as the world's strongest swordsman, his experience was far beyond that of ordinary people. He had seen the most powerful combatants in this world and knew of the most terrifying powers. But now, upon hearing Lelouin, Hawkeye didn't refute him at all. On the contrary, he simply nodded in agreement. Jian looked at Lelouin's confident expression. Although in his heart he still desperately wanted to dissuade them, for some reason, after seeing Saitama's calm and simple expression, he miraculously felt somewhat at ease and no longer made any moves to stop the three of them. However, after walking a distance in the direction the three were heading, Jian seemed to realize something. "Honored guests, why don't you come to our Kokoyashi village first? The oranges in our village are the most delicious in the world." Seeing Jian's warm invitation, all three of Lelouin's group strangely shook their heads. Especially Saitama, whose reflective bald head shook particularly fast. "There are quite a few monsters over there. We'll go deal with the monsters first, then enjoy the food. That's the only way to do justice to good food." "I think so too." Hearing Saitama's words, Lelouin nodded in agreement. However, Hawkeye felt a bit surprised after hearing their words. Because the direction Saitama was pointing was not where he imagined the stronghold of the Arlong pirates on this archipelago would be, but rather a place he was very familiar with. "That symbol, is there a marine base on this archipelago?" At this moment, Hawkeye's tone was full of curiosity. After all, he had witnessed the tragic state of the village just now with his own eyes. Combined with Jian's description, Hawkeye instinctively thought that this archipelago was a place occupied by the Arlong pirates. He assumed that because of the pirate cruise control, no news could get out, which led to this place being occupied by the Arlong pirates for so many years. But now, after seeing the iconic building of the marine base, Hawkeye was a bit bewildered. If there was a marine base on this island, how could such a tragedy have happened? When he thought of this, a flash of sternness couldn't help but flicker in Hawkeye's eyes. "We do indeed have a marine base here. However, that base is another Arlong Park. In fact, it's a place even more evil than Arlong Park. It's precisely because that marine base exists, and because Captain Nezumi of the 16th branch is there, that no news from Kokoyashi village can get out at all. We have no way to get help from the true Marines and have fallen into this current hell. Actually, at the very beginning, we in Kokoyashi village did send villagers to the marine base to ask for help. But all the villagers who went to ask for help died. Gradually, we lost all our illusions. Even if we could go out to sea, we weren't sure if the Marines we met would be righteous." Listening to Jian's account, the three of them could sense the overflowing despair in his words. When you go through untold hardships to escape from hell, thinking you can get help, only to find another prison wall after running to the boundary. This kind of despair was perhaps what made Jian and the others truly have no desire to seek help from the outside world, and completely lose the will to resist. How ugly, Marines. Oh, so in this world, Marines aren't good people either. It seems this world has even more monsters than mine. Saitama scratched his head, muttering thoughtfully. Yes, Saitama. This world also needs a hero for fun like you. After saying that, Lelouin started walking directly toward the marine base ahead. Hawkeye and Saitama followed behind Lelouin. Jian didn't try to stop the three of them again, but he didn't follow either, just watching from a distance. In his eyes, there was hope, and even more so, a kind of determination. Chapter 7, the most overbearing aura in this world. This marine base is indeed rotten to the core. They approached the marine base. Hawkeye's cold, solemn voice drifted out faintly. The three of them had spotted several corpses discarded carelessly not far from the base's main gate. The wounds on these corpses were stark and exposed. They revealed the kind of abuse these people had suffered before they died. Some of the female corpses, in particular, were too unbearable to look at. It was obvious these bodies had only recently met their tragic ends. However, the piles of bleached bones nearby indicated that this place seemed to be a frequent dumping ground for these Marines. On this archipelago, over such a long period of time, there was no telling how many tragedies had already occurred. Outside this marine base, which represented justice in this world, no one knew exactly how much evil had transpired. No. Someone knew. Those who committed these crimes with their own hands knew. Before Laluan could say anything, Hawkeye reached out and gripped Yoru, which was strapped to his back. Such filthy people are unworthy of Yoru, but these souls deserve it. However, before Hawkeye could swing his sword at the marine base, an aura suddenly erupted from all around Laluan. Is this mysterious captain finally going to make a move? This was the first thought in Hawkeye's mind. He had been fully able to sense Saitama's strength before. And to have a crew member like Saitama, whose every word and action showed an instinctive respect for Laluan, meant that Laluan was definitely not as simple as he appeared to Hawkeye's senses. After all, in Hawkeye's perception, Laluan seemed like a completely ordinary person. But how was that possible? Seeing Laluan about to act, Hawkeye involuntarily narrowed his eyes, preparing to see the mysterious captain's methods. Aura. He simply released his own personal field. It manifested the spirit that Laluan, this mysterious captain, possessed as a leader, the qualities of a king. As expected, this guy has conqueror's haki. As Laluan released his aura and walked toward the marine base, an invisible force instantly filled the surroundings. With every step Laluan took, his aura continued to climb and grow stronger. The few people guarding the base gate saw the trio approaching and were about to rush over to question them, but their eyes rolled back and they lost consciousness entirely, collapsing to the ground. Gravel on the ground defied gravity, beginning to tremble and float up, hovering at knee height like a terrified constellation. Immediately after, countless black and red cracks erupted from the dense bluestone slabs beneath Laluan's feet. It wasn't that they were shattered by a shockwave, it was more like the structure of the stone slabs themselves chose to disintegrate under the pressure of a certain will. The cracks spread like lightning. Wherever they passed, the stone silently turned to powder, revealing the damp, almost pulsing soil beneath. The air became viscous, and light underwent a bizarre refraction and bending around Laluan. It made the distant marine base look as if it were swaying underwater. Hawkeye felt the aura erupting from Laluan, and beneath his sharp pupils, he was filled with shock. Conqueror's haki, he hadn't just seen it, he had personally faced it countless times. Hawkeye had always felt that his friend Red Hair's haki was the strongest in the world. Even the strongest man, Whitebeard, felt inferior to Red Hair in terms of Conqueror's haki in Hawkeye's estimation. But the man before him, the aura he was releasing right now had already reached the peak of Red Hair's level. What was most exaggerated was that the aura on Laluan was still climbing. Relying on aura alone, it was putting immense pressure even on him, the world's strongest swordsman. As Laluan and his group stepped into the marine base, black and red lightning didn't strike down from above, but erupted directly from the void, like countless thick, enraged veins winding, exploding, and tearing at each other in the air. This lightning had no thunder, there was only a low-frequency hum that put direct pressure on the eardrums, as if space itself was being repeatedly folded by a massive force. By now, the entire marine base had become deathly silent. As far as the eye could see, marine soldiers were collapsed everywhere on the ground. In this base, not a single person could remain conscious under this kind of aura. The dense, lead-gray clouds high in the sky were even violently churned and torn apart by an invisible force, swirling into a massive eye of a storm. The center of the storm's eye wasn't the sky, but a deep darkness that seemed to lead to the void. What it cast down wasn't light, but a pure sense of oppression. Sunlight struggled to pierce through the rifts in the clouds, only to be twisted and swallowed at the edge of the black and red lightning field, forming a ring of pale halo. At this moment, Laluan was experiencing the aura he was emitting. When Laluan first received the trait, he wanted to see what kind of effect the system's most overbearing aura in this world would actually have. Now that he was trying it out, the aura of this world could indeed kill. The current intensity wasn't even the strongest he could achieve. Laluan was still continuously increasing his aura. Boom! As Laluan's aura continued to rise, the area surrounding the marine base seemed to turn into a crucible of will. Furthermore, Laluan had now confined his aura within this specific range. Gravel, dust, and even sound in conventional colors were evacuated and purified, leaving only the most primitive oppression. In this area, the laws of nature seemed to have temporarily failed, only the king's will was engaged in a primitive roar. Why did all these people faint? just as Luluan felt like he had become a true god in this area. The voice of a bald man rang out with utter indifference. Luluan turned his head to look. Saitama didn't seem affected in the slightest, his expression still as plain and unadorned as ever. Meanwhile, the man known as the world's strongest swordsman. He was already hunched over, drenched in sweat. Saitama was still Saitama, after all. Having tested what he needed to test, Luluan instantly withdrew his aura. After all, the entire marine base now seemed on the verge of collapsing, the walls riddled with cracks. Luluan felt he could grind the base to powder with his aura alone. The moment Luluan withdrew his aura, Hawkeye suddenly slumped to the ground, panting heavily, his sharp yellow eyes staring at Luluan in complete disbelief. Chapter 8, Monsters Cleared, Branch 16 Destroyed. To think that one could achieve such a level through sheer aura alone? This was the only thought in Hawkeye's mind at this moment. The only thought. Releasing one's aura to clear out small fry. This was merely the most rudimentary application of Conqueror's Haki. As an ability that only one in a million possessing the qualities of a king could comprehend, the most powerful aspect of Conqueror's Haki was the ultimate destructive power of Haki Infusion. Haki Infusion, as the name implies, is short for Conqueror's Haki Infusion. It refers to the high-level combat technique of coating weapons or one's body with Conqueror's Haki to significantly enhance attack power. A simple strike could split the heavens and shake the earth. In the entire One Piece world, those who can use Haki Infusion are few and far between, and every one of them is among the top powerhouses of this world. Hawkeye had come into contact with the vast majority of these people. He also knew clearly what level their Conqueror's Haki was at. Regarding the mysterious young Luluan before him, in Hawkeye's view, the intensity of his Conqueror's Haki was likely unmatched by anyone else in this world. Captain Luluan, these people seem to have been completely knocked unconscious by your aura. After a brief scan of the marine base, Hawkeye spoke to Luluan. Though Luluan was momentarily surprised by this title, he didn't object and simply nodded. Furthermore, Luluan wasn't surprised at all by this outcome. After all, when he released his aura just now, he had actually exerted deliberate control over it. Meanwhile, Saitama's figure flickered and completely vanished from where he stood. The moment Saitama disappeared, Hawkeye's pupils suddenly constricted. Because the eyesight and perception he took the most pride in had become a complete joke at this moment, causing Hawkeye to feel a chill from the inside out. This was the second time since Hawkeye had become famous that he felt such a total lack of security. The first time was when he intended to draw his sword earlier on the coffin boat. Back then, although he felt a fatal threat of death, it was mostly mental pressure. He hadn't actually seen Saitama make a move. Now, after witnessing Saitama's speed that was akin to instant disappearance, Hawkeye couldn't help but ask himself a question in his heart. If the other party wanted to attack me, would my head already be separated from my body by now? The answer to this question, Hawkeye knew better than anyone. Simultaneously, within this marine base, mists of blood exploded in various places. Most were people in marine uniforms, but some were fishmen whose appearances were entirely different from humans. Using his unique way of identifying monsters, Saitama was clearing out every single monster within this marine base. With speed indiscernible to the naked eye, he also moved all the civilians who had been knocked unconscious to the outside of the marine base. Of course, among these civilians, some were also wearing marine uniforms. Which one was Captain Nezumi? Was he inside this military base? Luluan didn't know. Luluan only knew that even if Captain Nezumi wasn't dead now, he would never be able to control these islands again in the future. There were two tumors on these islands. One was the Arlong pirates. After all, it was that group of fishmen from the Arlong pirates who acted tyrannically on these islands, creating this purgatory and committing countless sins. The other was the marine base where he currently stood. If it weren't for Captain Nezumi's shielding, acceptance of bribes, and cooperation with the Arlong pirates, these islands wouldn't be in this state. Neither was more evil than the other. Both deserved to die just the same. After dealing with these vermin, Luluan naturally harvested his own spoils of war. Wow! A golden legendary! So much gold, silver, and treasure. Leading Saitama and Hawkeye into the vault deep within the base, Saitama gave a casual swipe, sending the several-meter-thick iron warehouse door flying, revealing chest after chest of gold and silver jewelry inside, along with berries piled up like small mountains. The quantity was so vast that even Hawkeye, a member of the Shichibukai, couldn't help but sigh. Just how much have these beasts plundered and taken from the Arlong pirates over the years? A conservative estimate of the total value here is at least 100 million berries. Looking at the warehouse full of treasure before him, Luluan didn't hesitate and communicated directly with the system in his mind. System, roughly how many berries is all this stuff in front of me worth in total? Ding. Spoils of war detected. Estimated total value is over 350 million berries. Does the host wish to collect it all? Upon hearing the system's voice, Luluan didn't hesitate for a second and chose to collect it all. From Hawkeye's perspective, he only saw Luluan give a light wave of his hand toward the treasure in the warehouse. A warehouse full of treasure instantly vanished from the spot, as if there had never been anything in the warehouse to begin with. Witnessing this, Hawkeye's pupils constricted once again. Is this a space-type ability? Luluan's mysterious and unpredictable methods truly made Hawkeye feel shocked once more. He felt more and more that coming to the East Blue, the weakest sea, was the most correct decision he had ever made in his life. Hawkeye had never encountered powerhouses as mysterious as Luluan and Saitama. Now, Hawkeye was even a bit reluctant to leave. He felt as if boarding this small wooden boat was a matter of destiny. The way these two mysterious powerhouses did things also suited Hawkeye's taste perfectly. Faced with a warehouse of treasure, they didn't choose the womanly compassion of leaving the treasure behind to distribute to the local civilians. In Hawkeye's view, this decision was absolutely correct. Just taking it all would result in a happy ending for everyone involved. But if one tried to distribute the treasure equally among the local civilians, even if there were happy results for a time, it would surely lead to endless future troubles in the end. Hawkeye was very clear on this point. Killing these Marines didn't give Hawkeye any psychological pressure either. Even though he was a member of the Shichibukai and nominally on the Marine side, he didn't want to consider that at all right now. Even if the news of this Marine base being destroyed reached Marineford, the Marine headquarters, things like bounty posters, were likely meaningless to powerhouses like Luluan and Saitama. Meaningless. Shichibukai. Compared to that status now, Hawkeye wanted to stay by Saitama and Luluan's side more, even if he was just a chef slicing sashimi. Life in the future would certainly be very interesting. Now, Hawkeye was even a little impatient to see what kind of earth-shattering waves Luluan and Saitama would stir up in the future world. Chapter 9, Kokoyashi Village Rumble. The moment the three walked out of the Marine base, Luluan released his aura once again. The already dilapidated Marine base let out a massive roar, unable to withstand the pressure any longer. Marine East Blue 16th branch, just like that, along with the countless sins it had committed, it completely vanished from these islands. Bang! Jian, in the distance, had originally been holding his shovel, digging with extreme determination, a pit, just like any other day. After hearing the loud noise and witnessing the sinful Marine base collapse completely before his eyes, Jian's tears flowed instantly. He knelt straight down on the ground, looking at the collapsed Marine base and wailing loudly. Ever since the Arlong pirates arrived at these islands and colluded with the Marine base, during the years of hellish rule over these islands, when the fishman's blades slashed his cheeks, chest, and body, Jian did not cry. When he saw the Marines, in whom he had placed his hope, plundering just like the fishmen, Jian had not cried either. But now, Jian was trembling all over, venting his emotions without the slightest concealment or endurance. He just cried. Venting everything. Who are you people? What did you do to Jian? Outside a small village, just as Luluan's group was about to enter, a striking young girl with blue hair, wearing slippers and sporting a tattoo, stood at the village entrance and blocked them. Her eyes were full of vigilance, and she held a wooden stick in her hand. Beautiful young lady, Jian simply became too emotional and cried until he fainted. Once he wakes up, you'll naturally understand what happened. Looking at the wary Nojiko, Luluan explained with a smile. After staring at Luluan's face for a while, Nojiko finally lowered the wooden stick in her hand. Although she remained somewhat wary, her previous hostility had vanished. Instead, she bowed very seriously to Luluan. "Sir, thank you very much for bringing him back." "You're welcome. Where should we put Ajien? Please follow me this way." Seeing Ajien being carried bridal style by a handsome middle-aged man with a magnificent sword on his back, Nojiko also felt it was inappropriate and immediately led the three toward a wooden house. Walking into the village along the pebble path, Luluan and the other two looked around Kokoyashi village. The houses weren't neatly arranged like in the previous village but were distributed quite casually, and every household had several tangerine trees around their home. This was exactly the season for the tangerine harvest. Orange fruits hung heavily from the branches, looking quite substantial. After arriving at Nojiko's small courtyard, while Hawkeye was taking the fainted Ajien back into the house, Saitama couldn't help himself and plucked a tangerine from a tree in the yard. As he peeled the tangerine, juice sprayed out in the opposite direction of where Saitama's fingers were pressing. The sweet scent of tangerines instantly filled the air. Luluan smelled it and couldn't resist, plucking and peeling a tangerine himself. Sweet. This tangerine was just like the dream tangerine one only sees in advertisements: round, plump, juicy, and delicious. This tangerine was just so incredibly tangerine. Why? How is it? Good, right? As Nojiko asked, her little face was tilted high, her tone full of pride. It's absolutely delicious. Saitama didn't use his serious series eating style. Instead, he was very friendly, smiling and nodding at Nojiko after finishing a tangerine. Even Luluan hadn't expected Saitama to have such a gentle side. But then again, how could a hero for fun not have a kind heart? Reaching out, Luluan also plucked a tangerine to taste. The tangerine juice burst between his lips and tongue. It was so delicious. With such delicious fruit, it could be said that not just Kokoyashi village, but the entire archipelago shouldn't be as dilapidated as it was now. With these tangerines, the Konomi Islands could definitely become one of the wealthiest areas in the East Blue. But because of the collusion between the Marine 16th branch and the Arlong pirates, the Konomi Islands had instead become the most obscure and neglected region in the entire East Blue. At this moment, almost every house in Kokoyashi village had signs of decay. The buildings and fences showed obvious marks of damage followed by repairs. This village. It was hard to imagine how many times it had been raided by the Arlong pirates over the past nearly 8 years. The tangerines here are indeed extraordinary. After Hawkeye placed Ajien on the bed inside, he also came out and began eating tangerines with Luluan and Saitama. Just then, Nojiko brought out another basin of tangerines that looked even larger, presenting them before the three like a precious treasure. "In my yard, the tangerines from that tree behind the house are the best. You should try them." As Nojiko said this, her eyes squinted as she gave a bright, sunny smile. It was obvious. Seeing the three of them eating the tangerines so earnestly and praising them made Nojiko very happy. At this moment, she had completely dropped her previous guard, but her general message was still the same as when Ajien first met the group. "I can pack more of these tangerines for you to take with you when you leave in a bit." Indeed. Nojiko had no intention of keeping them for further hospitality. Instead, her words were constantly urging them to leave quickly. But Luluan only smiled. After saying a few more things, Nojiko stopped her persistent urging and sat down with the three, starting to enjoy this leisurely and pleasant time. As the tangerine peels on the ground increased, the expression on Luluan's face became increasingly relaxed. Some of his earlier emotions were gradually smoothed over, and he regained his calm. After this incident, Luluan unknowingly began to accept the fact of his transmigration more deeply, accepting everything in this world. Now, to him, this world was no longer just an anime, but an absolutely real world. Just as the three had eaten their fill and were about to head to Arlong Park, a clear, youthful girl's voice called out from outside. "Nojiko! I'm back!" Chapter 10, Just the Three of You? The moment that voice rang out, Nojiko suddenly stood up from her chair. A look of joy quickly flashed across her face, but when her gaze fell upon the three of them, it turned into a slight look of apology. "I'm sorry, everyone. My sister is back, so I might not be able to host you any longer." If you've finished eating, please take these tangerines and leave. As Nojiko spoke, she pushed several boxes of tangerines she had already prepared toward them. Her intention to ask them to leave was very obvious. Just as Nojiko finished speaking, another young girl appeared in the courtyard. The girl had brown eyes and beautiful orange hair in a playful shortcut, with a devilish figure. She wore a gold bracelet on her left wrist. She wore pearl earrings, and on her left shoulder was a tattoo similar in style to Nojiko's. The moment the girl appeared, her eyes involuntarily fell upon Luluan's group of three. Of course. After scanning the group, her gaze fixed straight onto Hawkeye. After all, Hawkeye's long sword, the supreme grade sword Yoru, was encrusted with jewels. Furthermore, Hawkeye's overall attire was very luxurious, naturally making him the girl's target instantly. I'm sorry, honored guests. This is my sister Nami. She's still young and a bit noisy, so please don't mind her. Of course we don't mind. Your sister is very beautiful. Seeing the hot and lightly dressed Nami, Luluan offered a sincere compliment. You have good taste. I like it. Sister, who are these people? Nami. You can't just ask like that, it's impolite. Although Nojiko was verbally criticizing Nami, Luluan could see her natural protectiveness and affection for her sister. As for Nami, Luluan could be said to know and like her very much. In Luluan's eyes, Nami was not just a beautiful woman with a good figure and appearance. In fact, the main reason she was liked was her good personality. Moreover, she was a resilient woman who inherited the will of her foster mother, Belmere, to have the strength to keep smiling at all times. Whether in battle or when sick, Nami would always put on a smile. At the same time, she also inherited Belmere's compassion. She was kind-hearted, incredibly gentle, and had a bright, cheerful personality. Now that they had met, Nami's personality felt even more profound in Luluan's perception. Seeing is believing, that was roughly the feeling. Never mind, regardless of where you're from, sister, you should hurry up and see our guests out safely. Come back inside, I have a big surprise to show you. After Nami finished speaking to Nojiko with a smile, she skipped back into the house. Meanwhile, Nojiko smiled at Luluan's trio once again and spoke. I'm truly sorry, everyone. Thank you very much for lending Ajin a hand, but you heard what my sister just said. Besides, this archipelago isn't very safe, so you should leave here quickly. After Nojiko finished speaking, she smiled and prepared to usher them out. However, Luluan had no intention of just carrying a few boxes of tangerines and leaving this archipelago. He simply stood up and said to Nojiko, before we leave, could you help us with one last small favor? Facing Luluan's small request, Nojiko naturally wouldn't refuse and immediately said to him cheerfully, of course, please tell me. Do you know where Arlong Park is on this archipelago? Could you take my two companions there? After Luluan said those words, Nojiko's smile froze directly on her face, and her eyes instantly became dull. Then, it quickly shifted to terror and disbelief. She even subconsciously took a few steps back. When she looked at him again, the previous friendliness was gone. Instead, Nojiko's entire expression was one of extreme shock, as if she found it hard to believe what she had just heard. Her lips even began to tremble slightly. She reached out a shaking hand to point at Luluan's trio, clearly terrified by Luluan's words. You, what did you say? Arlong Park? You want me to take your two companions there? Yes, Arlong Park. It shouldn't be far from here, right? Hearing Luluan's confirmation again, Nojiko's state of mind became quite unstable. Right now, Nojiko wasn't quite sure of the identity of Luluan's group. Going to Arlong Park? Were they bad people in league with Arlong? Or were they people who didn't know how terrifying that place was? Nojiko calmed her emotions and asked Luluan while forcing herself to remain composed, What are you going there for? However, although Nojiko was feigning composure, the trembling in her voice was impossible to hide. Seeing Nojiko, who had just been laughing and talking with them, suddenly turn into this state, Luluan felt it was somewhat funny for a moment, yet also felt a bit of heartache. Over the years, the harm the Arlong pirates had inflicted on the people of this archipelago was simply too great. But then Luluan thought about it and felt it was a bit ironic. They were so afraid of the Arlong pirates, yet just now while eating tangerines, they were laughing and playing with beings like the world's strongest swordsman and Saitama. Thinking of this, the corner of Luluan's mouth couldn't help but curl into a playful smirk. "Miss, the two of us are going there this time with the intention of wiping out Arlong Park. You just need to lead us there." Seeing Nojiko's appearance, Hawkeye could also roughly guess what she was thinking, so he spoke to her calmly. However, after Hawkeye's words fell, what greeted Hawkeye was not the imagined scene of Nojiko being extremely happy. On the contrary. After hearing these words, Nojiko's expression lost its previous shrinking and probing. Instead, it was instantly filled with worry and dread, and her whole body trembled even more violently. You actually want to go deal with the Arlong pirates?" No, absolutely not. You should leave quickly. The Arlong pirates aren't ordinary pirates, they're different from what you imagine." Nojiko's tone urging them to leave was even more urgent than before. And unconsciously, due to her terror, her voice grew much louder. This voice naturally alerted Nami, who had already entered the house. With a bang, the door opened. Nami rushed out in front of everyone. "What were you just saying? Dealing with the Arlong pirates, just the three of you?" Chapter 11, Setting Out. Nami's tone was also shocked to the extreme, filled with an air of incredulity. Especially when she spoke the words "deal with the Arlong pirates," it was as if she were hearing some fairy tale. Saying those few words seemed to require a great deal of effort. "No, absolutely not. I don't care where you came from, leave Kokoyashi village right now. Go back to where you belong. Arlong and his group aren't something noble young masters like you can handle." Compared to Nojiko, Nami's persuasion was clearly much more blunt and aggressive. The moment those words left her mouth, she was already in motion. She walked straight over, picked up the crates of tangerines Nojiko had packed, and headed toward the outskirts of Kokoyashi village. However, "Beautiful young lady, if you're willing to lead the way, I think we should be able to quickly take care of the Arlong pirates you're talking about." Luluan didn't follow Nami at this moment. Instead, just as Nami had taken a couple of steps, he called out to her directly. But looking at Nami, she didn't seem to believe Luluan's words at all. "You don't understand. The Arlong pirates aren't like the other pirates you've encountered in the East Blue. Arlong and his crew are fishmen, and they're a very strong group of fishmen." When she looked back at Luluan to speak, Nami's eyes even carried a hint of pleading. Similarly, her tone was extremely solemn and serious. It was clear that Nami was truly worried about them at this moment. However, just as they reached this point in the conversation, they heard the door of the nearby house open. "Nami, take these gentlemen there." "Uncle Ajien." Yes, the one who opened the door was indeed Ajien. Perhaps it was the sound of their arguing that woke Ajien up after he had fainted from crying earlier. Upon hearing Ajien say this, Nami and Nojiko immediately crowded around him. Their expressions seemed to say, "How could you say that?" But soon, they learned from Ajien's mouth the reason why he had said it. The marine branch has already been wiped out by these gentlemen. As these words left Ajien's mouth, Nami and Nojiko were instantly stunned where they stood. Though their expressions were as shocked and incredulous as before, this time, they were clearly tinged with an unbelievable ecstasy. When Ajien nodded again in confirmation, the two women immediately turned around, their gazes firmly fixed on Luluan. Seeing the two women's extremely shocked and joyful expressions, Luluan calmly repeated himself. "Beautiful ladies, how about it? Now, can you take my two companions and me there?" When Luluan spoke those words again, tears instantly welled up in Nojiko and Nami's eyes. And just then, an older man suddenly appeared from the neighboring house, his face also mirroring their shock. This man seemed to be very familiar with Ajien. Before he even rushed into the courtyard, he began shouting. "Ajien, is what you just said true? I think I just heard you say that the Marine Branch base was wiped out." The man's voice was very loud. The moment he spoke, the doors of several surrounding houses opened. People looked out and walked out of their homes toward the courtyard. Every face was filled with shock, but also a faint hint of unease. However, their eyes were all fixed intently on Ajien. Yes, fellow villagers, the marine branch has been wiped out by these three gentlemen. Now, they are preparing to set out for Arlong Park. This time, I think we should all lead the way for them. Nami, Nojiko, and Sean, you three go call the other villagers. Sean was the man who had just been shouting loudly. Upon hearing Ajien's words, and seeing the determination in Ajien's eyes, the man named Sean didn't hesitate for a moment. He turned and ran off immediately. We really don't have to take such a risk. Once I've earned 100 million berries, we can actually. Nami, don't be foolish. Before Nami could finish her sentence, Nojiko and Ajien shouted in unison. Hearing their words, Nami's tears flowed faster and more freely. In her eyes, there was heartbreak and pain. But it was also a kind of letting go, a kind of brand new hope. After a brief struggle, Nojiko went over and gave Nami a hug, then took Nami's hand and ran out of the small courtyard. Luluan and his group stood by, watching all of this unfold. It would be a lie to say they weren't moved. But now, Luluan was very glad that his first stop in this world was this archipelago. This place filled with love. Whether it was the destruction of the marine branch or the impending fall of Arlong Park, Luluan knew clearly just how much significance this held for the residents of these islands. The reason Ajien had them call the villagers, the reason he decided to have the whole village go together, perhaps held many, many meanings. It might be because witnessing the marine branch being wiped out gave him some understanding of their strength. But there was also another possibility. In Ajien's view, this might be the only chance they would ever have in their lives. Especially after he had personally buried the residents of another village not far away. Ajien didn't want to wait any longer. He had never believed that nonsense about earning 100 million berries, but before, it was the only hope, so he had forced himself to believe it. But now, there was a brand new hope. A hope that was much more likely to be realized. If he followed alone, he probably wouldn't be able to help much, he might not even be able to handle the weakest fishmen. But if the whole village went together, they could at least be of some small help, even if they could only kill the single weakest fishman, it would be something. Ajien thought that everyone in Kokoyashi village would be willing to go. And Ajien's thought was indeed correct. In less than half an hour, all the villagers of Kokoyashi village had arrived at the road that was the only way to Arlong Park. In the past, only Ajien would keep watch on this road, watching to see if any fishmen were coming to the village to commit evil deeds, so he could notify the villagers in time. But in the past, Ajien would only hide in the shadows and observe secretly. But now, all the villagers of Kokoyashi village stood here openly, right on the road. On this road that, in ordinary times, led out of Kokoyashi village. Facing the setting sun, and bathed in the glow of the sunset, the group walked toward Arlong Park without any hesitation. Chapter 12, Hope is in Your Own Hands. Ajien walked at the very front. A light breeze blew against the pinwheel atop his head. The setting sun dyed the pinwheel on Ajien's head a golden hue. Ajien walked at the very front, his face full of solemnity, his state of mind exceptionally serious. It wasn't just Ajien. Luluan, Hawkeye, and Saitama followed behind Ajien. The expressions of all three were very serious, even Saitama's expression had become earnest. That resolute face actually looked somewhat handsome at this moment. Behind them were all the villagers of Kokoyashi village. Everyone in the village who could still move had gathered together. Everyone held weapons in their hands, swords, axes, and even large iron maces. It was clear that the villagers had kept these weapons ready for a long time. Perhaps in their hearts, they had already rehearsed scenes of battle countless times. But now, all of it was becoming a reality. Every villager's face showed an unprecedented determination. The villagers clearly trusted Ajien's words implicitly. The hopeful looks in their eyes when they set off made Luluan's heart feel inexplicably heavy. Even though Luluan knew perfectly well that even he alone could easily wipe out Arlong Park. Not to mention the three of them together. Yet, in Luluan's heart, a sense of responsibility had emerged. You, how dare you? Stop. Stay right there. Ahead on the road. Several fierce-looking, muscular fishmen appeared in everyone's sight, weapons in hand. The fishmen walking toward them and the group heading to Arlong Park came face to face on the road. However, even though the fishmen saw the entire village armed with weapons, they didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, they shouted at the crowd with sinister grins. "You lowly humans, don't tell me you think holding that scrap metal gives you the right to fight us? Ha ha ha, look at these inferior beings from a trash race. It's simply hilarious. Ha 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 ha." The fishmen laughed so wantonly, completely disregarding the entire village. Their unrestrained laughter seemed to awaken some terrifying memories in the villagers, causing some of them to involuntarily slow their pace. But very quickly, the fishmen's wild laughter came to a complete halt. Because Luluan released his aura. To the villagers, they could only feel Luluan's strength, which gave them a sense of peace. But for the fishmen, it felt as if their spirits had suffered a heavy blow. They were instantly stunned where they stood. They became unsteady on their feet, and their weapons fell to the ground with a clatter. But neither of the two fishmen fainted, they seemed pinned to the spot by an invisible pressure, completely unable to move. Leading the way, Ajin turned his head in confusion when he saw the fishmen like this. As he turned, he met Luluan's encouraging gaze. Though Luluan didn't speak, Ajin knew exactly what that look meant. Looking at the two fishmen before him, Ajin no longer hesitated. He raised his axe and walked straight toward them. Seeing Ajin approach with an axe, the expressions on the two fishmen's faces were no longer arrogant and overbearing as before. There was only endless terror. On the contrary, Ajin's face no longer bore the terrified expression of the past. Slash, upon reaching one of the fishmen, he swung his axe without any hesitation. However, this swing didn't aim for a vital spot, it just landed heavily on the fishman's arm. Perhaps because the axe hadn't been sharpened properly, even though Ajin swung with great force, it didn't even manage to sever the arm. It only sliced off a chunk of flesh from the upper arm, revealing the ghastly white bone. The blade cut deep into the flesh, even scraping off some bone fragments. The fishman instantly began to wail and curse in pain. His body collapsed to the ground. Although Luluan had eased the pressure of his aura to allow the fishman to howl, the creature could still only make the smallest of movements on the ground. Ajin only delivered that one swing. Instead of continuing to hack away, he turned back toward the villagers of Kokoyashi village. Again, there was no verbal communication, only a look. Nojiko, carrying an iron sword, also walked up to the fishman. She, too, thrust her sword forward without hesitation. It pierced straight into the fishman's belly, and blood gushed out. The fishman couldn't help but wail even more painfully, his screams becoming more shrill. The other fishman, also suppressed by the aura, trembled like a sieve upon seeing his companion's miserable state. When he looked at the people of Kokoyashi village, his arrogance was gone, replaced for the first time by fear. He even began to plead for mercy from the race he had always considered inferior. But no one paid any heed to the cries of the two fishmen. The whole scene became exceptionally orderly as the villagers of Kokoyashi village, one by one, walked up to the fishmen and used the weapons in their hands. For the first time, they truly attacked the fishmen who had brought them countless painful memories and enslaved them for years. The fishmen's wails went from sharp and painful to gradually fading away, and the same happened to the other one. Even though the two fishmen were long dead, the villagers continued to approach one by one until everyone had struck them once. Luluan's aura surged. The two puddles of bloody pulp before him were instantly blasted aside. The crowd continued their grand march toward Arlong Park. But compared to the beginning, the eyes of every villager had become firmer, and they unabashedly revealed the emotions they had hidden in their hearts for years. This was the first time in who knows how long that they had vented their deepest emotions so intensely. Faced with the fishman's atrocities, thoughts of revenge were something the villagers of Kokoyashi village hadn't dared to dream of for a long time. But now, they truly didn't need to dream anymore. Because hope was right before them. Hope was now held in their very own hands. Chapter 13, The Arlong Pirates Arlong Park. On the largest island of the Kanomi Islands. The high walls surrounding it looked even sturdier than a marine base, like a thick, indestructible barrier. The entire complex looked like a massive garden, exceptionally beautiful and prominent. Around these buildings, there was also a wide moat. It securely protected the entire park in the centermost area. In the very center of the park stood a towering pagoda, majestic and grand, with a magnificence that seemed slightly out of place with the rest of the Kanomi Islands. Beside the moat, there were rows of beach chairs where fishmen were frolicking, lounging, and shouting boisterously. It was quite lively. And the further one went inside, the larger and more ferocious the fishmen appeared. This place was the most luxurious complex on the Kanomi Islands, Arlong Park, also known as Fishman Park. On a chair at the very center of the park, a fishman with a long, saw-toothed nose sat there dominantly. He was massive, far exceeding the fishmen around him. His purplish-gray skin and mouth full of sharp teeth displayed his fishman heritage and ferocity. On his left chest was a sun-shaped tattoo. He wore a gray round hat and an open floral shirt. His flamboyant attire seemed to reflect its owner's arrogant personality. "Boys, welcome to Arlong Park. Now that you're here, forget everything that happened before and just enjoy yourselves. Come, cheers. Let's eat and drink to our heart's content." As Arlong's voice rang out, the fishmen throughout the park erupted in excitement, sinking once again into a wave of revelry. Not far from Arlong, an octopus fishman was holding a plate of roast meat, eating voraciously, seemingly enjoying the park's festivities. But even as he enjoyed himself, a hint of unease and worry flickered in his eyes. This octopus fishman was Hachan. Beside him was a fishman with a long mouth and protruding lips that looked like a kisslip fish. His cheeks were rosy, making him look quite amusing. "Hachan, slurp." The boss went out and found quite a few new comrades again. "Yeah, there are more and more fishmen in our park now. I expect the boss will start expanding outward again soon. A mere Kanomi Islands can't satisfy our boss, slurp." The two chatted while eating roast meat. Although they were in an ocean of joy, they weren't fully enjoying themselves. Their conversation revealed deep concerns for the Arlong pirates. As those who had followed Arlong from the beginning, they knew better than anyone just how great their boss's ambition was. A mere Kanomi Islands was no longer enough to satisfy him. Now, the boss's sights were set on the entire East Blue. The reason he kept that little girl from Kokoyashi village, told her the nonsense about buying back the village for 100 million berries, and had her draw sea charts was for this purpose. But this sea, the East Blue, though called the weakest sea, the two still didn't dare think about controlling the entire East Blue. After all, this sea was that person's hometown. You two, stop being so hesitant. The more of our kin there are, the more it shows the strength of our Arlong pirates. Are you really satisfied with a mere Kanomi Islands? While they were talking, a burly fishman wearing a black karate gi walked up behind them and spoke. "Stop talking about such buzzkill topics. Let's revel to our heart's content." This fishman was Karubi. He was a ray fishman, a level 40 fishman karate master. His finishing move, the 1,000-tile true punch, could break 1,000 tiles underwater. With a bounty as high as 9 million berries, he was the strongest member of the Arlong pirates besides Arlong himself. And these three were the three top officers of the Arlong pirates. The current Arlong pirates were expanding frantically. Their boss, Arlong, constantly went out to sea to recruit many fishmen comrades. But as the number of fishmen grew, they gradually became harder to manage. Although the three had always believed fishmen were indeed the superior race, they hadn't been that cruel toward humans before. Until one day, Boss Arlong, whom they had always followed, seemed to change. He began to target the humans on the Kanomi Islands with increasing brutality. He even learned to use berries to bribe that Captain Nezumi of the Marine Branch, whom even the three of them looked down upon. And he built Arlong Park. Since then, the entire Arlong pirates seemed to have changed. In the beginning, the three were very happy, feeling that following Boss Arlong to the East Blue was the best decision they had ever made. Every day was spent eating, drinking, and playing. It was pure joy. But slowly, as more fishmen comrades joined and Boss Arlong's ambition grew, worry began to creep into their hearts involuntarily. They didn't actually have many thoughts about being cruel to humans or colluding with Captain Nezumi. After all, humans were just a lowly race and could be treated however one wished. What they feared was the legendary Vice Admiral of the East Blue, the marine hero, Garp. Although the fishman boss, Jinbe, had become one of the Shichibukai, which was why they dared to be so arrogant in the East Blue. The three also knew clearly that once the events on the Konomi Islands were exposed, that marine hero Garp wouldn't care about any of that. Especially today. That feeling of unease in their hearts grew even stronger. "What are you three whispering about over there? Come over here." Arlong's gruff voice rang out. Hearing him, the three immediately stood up and walked toward Arlong. Seeing the group of fishmen standing behind Arlong, the three knew they were about to get another wave of subordinates. Based on current preparations, all three knew it wouldn't be long before they stepped out of the Konomi Islands to conquer the next territory. However, just as the three reached Arlong's site to prepare for the distribution of subordinates, suddenly, from the direction of the park's main gate, several fishmen came running and stumbling, looking very flustered. This kind of situation had never occurred since they landed on the Konomi Islands and established Arlong Park. Seeing their panicked state, Arlong couldn't help but frown and said displeasurably, "What happened? Why are you in such a panic?" But before these fishmen could explain, a loud boom was heard from the main gate of Arlong Park. A massive explosion rang out. Chapter 14, Saitama's Conqueror's Hockey Rumble. As the massive sound rang out, the entire section of the wall at the entrance of Arlong Park collapsed with a bang, kicking up clouds of dust. Arlong and his group, along with the gaze of almost every fishman in the park, all looked toward the park's entrance in unison. The once unrestrained laughter seemed to have a pause button pressed at this moment. All the fishmen looked on in confusion, while only Arlong and a few officers had eyes filled with vigilance. In the current Arlong pirates, except for a few officers, almost the vast majority of fishmen had been turned into useless trash by this life of ease. They had completely lost the vigilance they had developed in the New World. And, after the wall collapsed and the smoke completely cleared, pfft, ha 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 ha. Seeing the frail villagers of Kokoyashi village appearing before them, holding all sorts of weapons that didn't even look like weapons, the entire Arlong Park instantly erupted into a burst of laughter. Almost all the fishmen present laughed unrestrainedly. "Ha ha, these lowly humans. This is too funny. Do these people really want to die that badly? Look at how frail they are. They were born destined to be weaklings. Since they're seeking death, then kill them all." The fishmen present clamored and mocked. They completely failed to notice that the three major officers of the Arlong pirates, along with their most powerful captain, Arlong, were staring at a certain figure in the crowd, their bodies completely stiff, not daring to make a single move. Especially the officer Hachan, his several tentacles were shaking like a sieve. And the gaze of these few naturally fell in unison upon Hawkeye, who was at the very front. After all, among this group of people, the one they knew and were most familiar with was none other than Hawkeye. After pushing down the gate's wall, Hawkeye saw the Arlong pirates and gave them a faint scan. Hawkeye couldn't hold back any longer and spoke directly to Arlong in the distance. "Defectors of the Sun Pirates, such a display is truly too hideous." A cold light flashed within Hawkeye's sharp yellow eyes. If Loloan and the others hadn't been by his side, Hawkeye might have already made his move. Because on the way here, around Arlong Park, the scenes they had witnessed were truly too bloody and unacceptable. All sorts of brutally killed humans, severed limbs, remains, and rotting bones were piled into small hills one after another. In this magnificent yet cruel world, Hawkeye strongly acknowledged the law of the jungle, where the strong devour the weak and might makes right. However, such acts of slaughter were what Hawkeye loathed the most. After sensing the coldness and killing intent in Hawkeye's tone, Arlong had only one thought in his mind. Why would a powerhouse of Hawkeye's level appearing before me? A drop of cold sweat slid down Arlong's forehead. The other three major officers behind him were even more shocked at this moment. In this park, other fishmen might not know how terrifying the man before them was, but the three of them knew very well. The world's strongest swordsman. Not to mention the few of them Even Boss Jinbi is no match for the man before them. This man is one of the strongest people in the world today, and he is also one of the Shichibukai. For someone of this caliber to appear before them, standing in front of the villagers of Kokoyashi village and speaking such words filled with killing intent. They knew very well what this meant. If they couldn't give this man a satisfactory explanation today, then it was very likely that the entire Arlong Park would be destroyed at this man's hands. After his mind raced, Arlong tried his best to restrain the intense panic and unease in his heart, projecting as natural a state as possible. "Shut up, all of you. Don't let your noisy laughter disturb our distinguished guest." After scolding the fishmen who were still laughing wildly, Arlong wore a fawning smile and hunched his back, walking toward Hawkeye in the distance, speaking as he went. "Great Lord Hawkeye, I think there might be some misunderstanding between us. We fisherman race have always admired powerhouses like you. Furthermore, our boss, Knight of the Sea Jinbi, is one of the 7 warlords of the sea just like you. I wonder if you could, for the sake of our boss." "Your boss? Didn't you defect from the Sun Pirates long ago?" Hearing Luluan's sudden words, Arlong stopped in his tracks. It wasn't until this moment that Arlong realized the positions of the group before him were completely different from what he had imagined. Perhaps because he only had eyes for Hawkeye, Arlong naturally assumed that Hawkeye should be at the very front of the group. But looking closely now, Hawkeye, the world's strongest swordsman, was actually standing behind this young man, side by side with a bald man, and even a step behind that bald man. This positioning indicated that Hawkeye was not the leader of this group. The young man who just spoke, covered in openings and without a hint of a powerhouse's aura, was actually the leader of this group. Who is this man? Arlong didn't have the slightest clue. "Your Excellency, you must be joking. We have never defected from the Sun Pirates, nor have we ever betrayed Boss Jinbi." Arlong maintained as low a profile as possible, continuing to walk toward Hawkeye, mentioning Jinbi in every sentence. It seemed that only by doing so could he suppress the unease in his heart, only then could he have the confidence to approach a legendary powerhouse like Hawkeye. Unfortunately, this short distance was infinitely more difficult to traverse than Arlong had imagined. Because just as Arlong was about to reach Luluan's group, suddenly, a chill rushing straight to the back of his head and a death warning pressing against his heart made Arlong stop his forward steps. At this moment, an overwhelming aura instantly filled the entire Arlong Park. This kind of aura. At this moment, Hawkeye turned his head and looked at the source of this aura, Saitama, who was standing beside Luluan. This aura was different from Luluan's domineering and crushing aura. It was a terrifying aura that struck deep into the soul, bringing an ultimate threat of death and making one feel as if they were on the brink of death in an instant. As if in the next moment, one would be obliterated, shattered into dust by a single punch. As expected, this one also has Conqueror's Haki. Hawkeye wasn't surprised that Saitama could release such an aura. Because from the very beginning, Hawkeye knew how terrifying Saitama was. Seeing Saitama reveal his aura, Hawkeye was also very much looking forward to it. He wanted to see just how earth-shattering this powerhouse's move would be. Chapter 15, Arlong Park Erased Boss. Yeah, what is it? The scent of these monsters is truly terrible. Can I just clear them away? Turning his head, looking at Saitama's serious and earnest face, Luluan nodded calmly. Facing the Arlong pirates before him, characters he had previously seen in anime. When he first watched it, Luluan didn't particularly loathe some of these characters, he even felt that these fishmen had certain redeeming qualities. But being here in person was different. Along the road from Kokoyashi village, and the hellish sights he had just witnessed outside the park, Luluan truly had no desire to speak with them. At this moment, he was just as angry as Saitama, who was unconsciously radiating killing intent. The second after Luluan gave a slight nod, Saitama made no other superfluous movements. He simply took a few steps forward and threw a light punch into the air toward Arlong Park. The moment Saitama raised his hand, Hawkeye subconsciously gripped his sword. In that split second when Saitama raised his hand, even though the punch wasn't aimed at him, it made Hawkeye feel for the second time that death was so close. so close that his survival instinct forced his hand to tighten around his sword. In Hawkeye's pupils, Saitama's plain, slowly rising arm and clenched fist seemed to form a terrifying vortex, absorbing all the surrounding energy into itself. At this moment, Hawkeye's eyes seemed unable to see any other scene. He could only see a fist wrapped in a red glove, magnifying infinitely. Then, light and slow, yet making it impossible for anyone to move or predict, he threw a punch toward Arlong Park. Boom! The moment the punch landed, a massive sonic boom echoed through the sky. Hawkeye clearly saw that after the punch was thrown, the entire Arlong Park ahead was instantly struck by a force too terrifying to describe. The entirety of Arlong Park, including all the buildings and the fishmen within. In the shortest instant his perception could register, they were reduced to dust. Then they were scattered into the distant sky and the ocean. In just a second or two, the entire Arlong Park seemed to have been erased, vanishing into thin air from Hawkeye's sight and perception. Immediately after, a fierce gale blew, instantly carrying away the dust that had been flying in the air due to inertia. Hawkeye, the nickname of Dracul Mihawk. Dracul Mihawk possessed a pair of eyes as sharp as a hawk's, with terrifying insight. Under Mihawk's eyes, all techniques would lose their flashy exterior and reveal their essence. This was also one of the innate abilities Mihawk was most proud of. But now, even with those hawk eyes, all Mihawk could see were these few dreamlike frames in the eyes of the villagers from Kokoyashi village behind them. They only saw the bald guy, Saitama, walk forward a few steps and throw a punch at the air. Then, the whole world seemed to have its mute button pressed. The Arlong Park that had been like purgatory before them, the place they feared and dreaded most in the depths of their memories, completely vanished before their eyes. In their current field of vision, they could only see the remaining parts of the island and some lingering clouds in the sky. Looking from their perspective, behind Saitama, they could only see what looked like a giant fist-shaped void ahead of them. Everyone present was stunned. Right now, they simply couldn't process the information their eyes were seeing. They couldn't accept the reality of what had just happened. Including Laluan. But soon, Ajien, who was at the front, found tears streaming down his face at some point, his body going limp as he slumped to the ground. Behind Ajien, Nojiko, Nami, and all the villagers of Kokoyashi village. Gazing at the scene before them, they finally reacted. Cheers, screams, and heart-wrenching sobs. Everything erupted at that moment. The villagers of Kokoyashi village all wept together. No! At this moment, Loluan also suddenly shouted. His voice carried a hint of a sob. As if he had realized something, he ran toward where the tower had once stood. Unfortunately, he stopped after only a couple of steps because ahead of him was the edge of what remained of the half-island. The entire Arlong Park, all the fishmen, all the buildings, and everything else had been instantly erased from this world by Saitama, leaving not a single trace. This, naturally, included all the treasures within Arlong Park. That night, the villagers of Kokoyashi village went to sleep very early. After venting their emotions, the villagers felt as if a 10,000-pound shackle had been lifted. They had all cried until they were spent. Later, Nojiko, Nami, and others organized everyone to support each other back to the village. Compared to the aggressive scene when they left, intending to fight to the death, the villagers returned supporting one another, looking as if they had been through some great battle. Even though there was no battle, they were exhausted from crying tears of joy over the destruction of Arlong Park. On the way back, Luluan watched the villagers supporting each other. He also smiled very happily. As for Saitama, he had returned to his simple, somewhat oblivious state. Hawkeye followed silently behind Saitama. From the moment that punch was thrown until now, Hawkeye's mind had been filled with his experiences of the past 2 days. Watching the two men following the villagers, one looking a bit improper, yet both appearing extremely ordinary. Hawkeye couldn't say what his thoughts were right now. If before he only wanted to spar with truly strong people to improve his swordsmanship, then now, he had no desire to spar at all. But at the same time, he also had no desire to leave. I'm exhausted. No, Jiko. Go call a few more people to help out. Early the next morning, Nojiko, Nami, and some villagers woke up early. After waking up, they went to a small cave in the back mountain to haul a huge wooden box that had been buried underground toward the courtyard where Luluan and the others were staying. Chapter 16, 3 Consecutive Setting Draws. System, start the draw. Inside the house at this moment, Luluan was unaware of the villagers' movements outside. After waking up, Luluan felt the time was right and immediately chose to draw new tags. At this moment, Luluan desperately wanted to become stronger and possess more abilities. He couldn't help it. Who told the first companion he summoned to his side to be such a freak? Furthermore, the first native he encountered was the greatest swordsman in the One Piece world, one of the most powerful people in existence. This native, for now, didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. It looked like he planned to stay by his side and act as a chef. However, having such a native by his side was actually quite nice. Ding! The host currently has a balance of 350 million berries. Would the host like to draw random settings? Yes. Draw 3 times directly. Ding! Random settings drawing. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the settings, Powerhouse, Sea King, and Sunny and Cheerful Big Boy. Powerhouse forcibly adds the term powerhouse to the first impression of any existence upon seeing the host. The closer the distance, the stronger the impression. Sea King grants the ability to manipulate the ocean. The strength of the ability is related to ocean affinity. With daily contact with the ocean, the ability's strength will grow naturally every day. Sunny and Cheerful Big Boy, your smile is like the warm sun in winter, making people feel a gentleness from the bottom of their hearts, significantly increasing the favorability of the target of your smile. As the system's voice faded, Luluan showed a wry smile. Among the 3 tags this time, he had received one that was actually the most useful to him. Sea King? What kind of ghost name is that? I'm a pure love warrior, I hate those Minotaur types the most. However, this ability could definitely be called one of the strongest in this world. Because any devil fruit user is afraid of seawater. Yet he could manipulate seawater. If used properly in the future, this ability could definitely become one that creates miracles. Though his seawater affinity would probably be very low at the start, after all, he was someone who got seasick. But in this world, it was hard not to come into contact with seawater. With this tag, Luluan felt he could definitely get stronger every day even while lying down. But the other 2 tags seemed rather useless. They didn't provide any additional boost or bonus to his actual combat power. That powerhouse tag simply made everyone think he was a powerhouse at first glance. The any existence in that description, at least in Luluan's current view, referred to all people, and possibly included sea kings, the mink tribe, fishmen, and other such creatures. Its utility probably wasn't particularly great. As for Sunny and Cheerful Big Boy, that goes without saying. However, overall, Luluan was still very satisfied with the settings drawn this time. At least this system draw didn't have any thank you for playing nonsense. In his previous life, Luluan had read plenty of web novels. Every time he saw a draw result that was thank you for playing or something similar, Luluan would feel a bit disgusted. Big Brother Luluan. Just as Luluan finished drawing the settings, he happened to hear Nojiko's voice coming from outside the door. It seemed that the destruction of Arlong Park had a truly massive impact on the people of Kokoyasi village. Even her voice sounded much more lively than it had yesterday. And her tone was no longer as flat and gloomy as before, but had added some of a young girl's playfulness. Brother Luluan. You can't still be asleep, can you? Nami's voice also drifted in at this time. And it wasn't just the 2 girls, there were also the voices of many other villagers. One by one, just by listening to their voices, one could feel their heartfelt happiness and joy. Having experienced the emotional release after Arlong Park was wiped out yesterday, they were now gradually beginning to return to their original selves from years ago, before the Arlong pirates had invaded these islands. Luluan pushed open the door and went into the yard. He began to greet the villagers warmly, as their faces were piled with smiles and their eyes were full of gratitude. Every villager was extremely enthusiastic, and many even crowded forward, wanting to shake hands with Luluan. The villagers were carrying all sorts of things in their hands and placing them in the yard. But what attracted Luluan's gaze the most was the huge wooden cart pushed over by Nami, Nojiko, and Ajien's group, along with the boxes stacked on top of it. What is this? After staring at the boxes for a while, Luluan asked Nami, who was smiling brightly, in confusion. Brother Luluan, you'll know once you open it. On Nami's beautiful face, the smile was so bright and unrestrained, even carrying a bit of pride. Luluan could perceive that grand emotion of joy with extreme clarity. Meeting the eager eyes of Nami, Nojiko, and the others, Luluan opened the lid of the topmost box. Wow! A golden legendary! As soon as it opened, what met his eyes was a dazzling golden light. The box was filled to the brim with gold and treasures. As Luluan opened this box, Ajien also casually opened the box next to him. Inside that box, it was filled with an entire chest of berries. Mr. Luluan, this is a thank you gift our Kokoyasi village prepared to show our gratitude to you. Brother Luluan, most of these were saved up by me. As soon as Ajien finished speaking, Nami proudly raised her little head. Upon hearing Nami's words, Luluan also instantly realized. Indeed. During these past few years, Nami seemed to have been working hard to make money, acting as a little cat burglar and drifting between various pirate ships. And estimating based on this point in time, Nami indeed should have saved up at least several tens of millions of berries. It should be these right in front of him. The Konomi Islands were originally a very prosperous commercial archipelago. This was also why Captain Nezumi of Marine Branch 16 was able to amass a full 300 million berries. One must know that a devil fruit in the New World is only worth about 100 million. Over 300 million berries was already a very exaggerated, astronomical figure. But it was also because of this that one could perceive just how much evil Captain Nezumi and the others had committed on these islands. If there were no Captain Nezumi and no Arlong pirates, the Konomi Islands would surely have been one of the most prosperous areas in the East Blue. Faced with the offerings from Nami and the others, Luluan still didn't hesitate at all, directly nodding and accepting them. Seeing that Luluan did not refuse their kindness and accepted these treasures, the villagers in the yard laughed even more happily and brightly. Chapter 17, My Dream Has Already Been Realized. Drink up. Our village's tangerine wine is famous for being delicious. Our village's wine isn't bad either, come on, drink. Lord Luluan, please try the pears from our village. They are sweet, crispy, and were once the best-selling in the East Blue. In the blink of an eye, Luluan and the others had already stayed in Kokoyasi village for 5 or 6 days. During these 5 or 6 days, the destruction of Marine Branch 16 and the destruction of Arlong Park had spread throughout the entire Konomi Islands. After learning this good news, people from other villages came to Kokoyasi village at the first opportunity to pay their respects and thank Luluan. The entire Konomi Islands. For these past few days, there had been a joyful atmosphere everywhere. People from every village were busy rebuilding their homes and helping neighboring villages. After these past few years, the people of the various villages on the island seemed to have become more united than before. Thanks to the help of the warm-hearted powerhouse, Saitama. Hawkeye would also show up from time to follow Saitama and help with some things. Therefore, the reconstruction work of each village progressed very rapidly. Tonight's banquet. It was held after the reconstruction work in each village was basically completed, with everyone gathering in Kokoyasi village to celebrate the rebirth of the Konomi Islands. Luluan and his party, who had wiped out Marine Branch 16 and Arlong Park in one fell swoop, were naturally the guests of honor at this banquet. Almost everyone's gaze was focused on the three of them. The three of them were drinking very happily. Since coming to this world, these past few days could be said to be the most relaxed and enjoyable time Luluan had spent. Although the villagers really wanted him to stay, Luluan knew clearly that if he remained in the Konomi Islands in Kokoyasi village, there would definitely be big trouble later. After all, he had destroyed the marine base of Marine Branch 16. No matter how many heinous things Colonel Nezumi had done, as long as he destroyed a marine base, he would definitely be labeled a pirate. Now that the matter here had been resolved, it was time for him to leave. In this world, there were many places he really wanted to see. Brother Leiluan, are you guys about to leave? Just as everyone was drinking, tasting food, and having a great time, Leiluan turned his head and saw Nami standing directly behind him, hugging him. He instantly felt the back of his head warm and cozy. Nami's head was pressed against his ear as she quietly asked him this. Brother Leiluan, when you leave, can you take me with you? I'm very capable. I can draw nautical charts and sail ships. I'm a very skilled navigator. Nami's self-recommendation rang in Leiluan's ear. A navigator. It seemed his ship really was lacking a navigator right now. Moreover, Nami's role was not just as simple as navigation. Her personality destined her to be the type of person who would liven up the atmosphere on a ship and make all the crew members more united. Plus, with only a few grown men on his ship, it was indeed quite boring. The young girl in front of him. Sunny and bright, with a broad heart. Most importantly, she was very generous and had a very good impression of him. Leiluan really couldn't think of a reason to refuse. As for the straw hat, it was none of his business. Sure, if you want to leave with me, of course you can. Yay! I'm going to tell my sister this good news right away. After receiving Leiluan's affirmative answer, Nami immediately ran off happily. Looking at the villagers around him, Leiluan greeted and chatted with some people he was more familiar with. Of course, most importantly, Leiluan told the villagers that he intended to leave. And he asked the villagers to do him a favor, build a decent ship. His current small wooden boat could no longer hold so many people and supplies. The ship is easy to handle. Every village has people who can build ships. We will definitely prepare a big ship for you. Mr. Leiluan, I know you can't stay here with us forever. You are a big shot, but I hope you will remember our Konomi Islands, remember our villages. We will always stand behind you. Mr. Leiluan, let me toast you one more time. Upon learning that Leiluan would leave in a few days after the ship was built, the villagers came up one by one to say goodbye to Leiluan. Either crying or laughing, they expressed their gratitude and reluctance to part. But everyone expressed their most sincere blessings to Leiluan. These villagers also knew clearly that they couldn't keep Leiluan in the Konomi Islands forever, nor in their few villages forever. Expressing gratitude again and again and praying for Leiluan's journey was what everyone wanted to do most right now. It was also the only thing they could do. 2 more days passed. With the joint efforts of Leiluan, Saitama, and everyone else, a huge wooden ship was built. Inside the cabin were piled various specialties, as well as the boxes of treasures and berries that Nami had moved over earlier. Phew! As Nojiko finished moving the last box of tangerines. Standing at the bow of the ship, she looked at the crowd gathered below, finishing their final farewells to Leiluan and the others, and couldn't help but reveal a relaxed smile. It had been 10 days since the destruction of Arlong Park. In these 10 days, everyone had accepted the fact that the marine branch in Arlong Park had been completely destroyed, and their lives were becoming happier and happier. Was their current state of life the same as before all these events happened? People had already forgotten. But people knew. They were living very happily now, and all of this was because of Lord Leiluan, Lord Saitama, and Lord Mihawk in front of them. Without these few lords, perhaps they would still be living in that hell. On the ground, people were saying goodbye to Leiluan with reluctance. On the deck, Nami watched Nojiko looking at the crowd below and smiling, then walked quickly to Nojiko's side. Nojiko, do you really not want to leave with me? I want to, but now, I want to stay behind to protect Kokoyashi village, and protect our family's tangerine grove. Hearing Nojiko's words, Nami turned her head and took a deep look at her sister. You go with Lord Leiluan. Only by following him can you realize your dream. Sister, I want you to come with me. Nami, I have already realized my dream now. Goodbye. As the large ship slowly sailed away from the coast. On the deck, Leiluan, Saitama, Hawkeye, and Nami stood at the bow, listening to the shouting of the villagers below. Nami was streaming with tears, but she was also smiling brightly. The 3 of Leiluan were also smiling happily, waving goodbye to the villagers. Chapter 18, Marine Hero, Garp the East Blue. On the calm sea, a battleship was sailing steadily. On the ship's sails, the two large blue characters for Marine looked incredibly oppressive. At the front of the battleship was a giant dog head, with a large white bone clamped in its mouth. On the deck at the front of the battleship, a tall, broad-chested, and muscular old man was lying leisurely on a recliner, looking very comfortable. There was a scar over the old man's left eye, his blue eyes were filled with enjoyment, and his short, gray-white hair made him look very sharp. He wore a dog-head hat, and his marine justice cloak fluttered in the wind outside. With black and red shoulder pads, he looked both imposing and lazy. He was like a lion taking a nap, seemingly capable of unleashing unparalleled power once he woke up. The entire environment around him seemed to be influenced by his rest, becoming quiet and peaceful. Vice Admiral Garp. At that moment, the peaceful atmosphere was broken by a voice. "What is it?" Garp's dissatisfied voice rang out, clearly in a bad mood because of this sudden interruption. The adjutant naturally heard the dissatisfaction in Garp's tone, but he still proceeded to report a special situation he had recently noticed. "Vice Admiral Garp, not long ago, we received a signal from Marine Branch 16, but the Den Mushi only rang once before cutting off. We have been trying to contact Marine Branch 16 for the past few days, but we haven't been able to get through." "Marine Branch 16? Garp frowned after hearing the adjutant's words. "That's the territory of that guy Nezumi, right?" "Yes, Vice Admiral Garp." After receiving the adjutant's affirmative answer, Garp's expression darkened even further. He had met Nezumi before. The man was very sycophantic, and his demeanor had made Garp dislike him the first time they met. However, the man's competence seemed decent. The Konomi Islands where he was stationed hadn't reported any bad news in the last few years, and the taxes handed over every year were quite substantial. In the East Blue, he could be considered a fairly good branch captain. "Has their entire base completely lost contact?" "Yes, Vice Admiral Garp, the entire base is unreachable now." "Then let's make a trip to the Konomi Islands. The oranges from that place seem to be delicious. I've eaten plenty of them over the years, but I've never actually been to the islands to see them. I might as well go and take a look this time." Perhaps because his personal impression of Captain Nezumi wasn't particularly good, combined with the fact that Captain Nezumi's annual reports looked very good, Garp hadn't actually visited the Konomi Islands even once over the years. After receiving Garp's order, the adjutant immediately turned the ship around and headed toward the Konomi Islands. Since they were currently patrolling the East Blue, their current position wasn't actually that far from the Konomi Islands. Moreover, Garp's dog-head battleship was extremely fast, so it took less than half a day for the ship to arrive at the location of the Marine Branch 16 base on the Konomi Islands. However, just as the battleship approached the island and stopped, Garp's eyes widened instantly. Then, his figure flickered, and he vanished from the battleship, appearing on the coastline. What came into view was a completely destroyed town. Bleached bones and broken walls were everywhere, all of them grating on Garp's nerves. According to the reports and tax data provided by Captain Nezumi every year, shouldn't the Konomi Islands be a very prosperous place? How could it end up like this? Garp's observation haki instantly enveloped the entire sea area. The next second, Garp's figure appeared beside that huge crater. Looking at the crooked handwriting on that wooden board, Garp was now beyond furious. This wasn't just pirates burning, killing, and looting the village, it was a literal massacre of all the civilians on the island. Such a heinous incident had actually occurred in his own East Blue, where he had been stationed. The next second, Garp's figure flashed and appeared outside the Marine Branch 16 base. The Marine Branch 16 base that had originally stood here had completely vanished before his eyes, leaving behind nothing but powder. It hadn't just been destroyed by fighting or artillery fire, it had been thoroughly reduced to powder. Previously, whether it was the slaughtered civilians of the entire village or the slaughtered soldiers of the entire base, it all made Garp beyond furious. Which pirate crew would dare to do such a thing in his East Blue? Garp kept thinking about this matter in his head. But right now, Garp was only thinking about one thing. What kind of exaggerated means or ability could possibly reduce an entire marine base to powder like that? Even Whitebird's tremor fruit would probably struggle to achieve this level of destruction, right? Garp couldn't figure it out. Ah! Marines, it's the Marines, run! We are Marines, why are you running? Just as Garp was feeling confused, he suddenly heard the sound of an argument coming from a distance. Although he didn't know what had happened on the Konomi Islands right now, it seemed there was a breakthrough, as there were still other residents on the island. Garp and the few adjutants beside him immediately flashed their figures and arrived at the source of the argument in a flash. Once there, Garp didn't even think, he kicked that Marine. You bastard, what exactly did you do to them? Watching the villagers huddle together, looking extremely fearful and terrified, Garp asked the Marine. Angrily. It was hard to believe that any of his subordinates would dare to bully ordinary civilians like this. Vice Admiral Garp, we really didn't do anything. Those civilians became like this as soon as they saw us, and we are very confused too. Vice Admiral Garp, are you the Marine hero, Garp, that they talk about in the newspapers? Ha ha, brother, I am Garp. Don't be afraid, we Marines won't easily harm civilians. I don't know what happened on the Konomi Islands. Garp laughed heartily while preparing to help the civilians who were paralyzed with fear on the ground to stand up so he could ask them some questions. However, this hearty laugh didn't last long, because Garp keenly observed something. When he went to help them, these civilians clearly dodged him instinctively. And when he had just said, Marines won't easily harm civilians, the reaction of these people was also very unusual, completely exceeding his expectations. Brother, don't worry, I am the Marine hero Garp. Can you tell me what happened on this island? Don't worry, even if you want to say bad things about the Marines, that's fine. After all, I know that not every one of us Marines is filled with justice. When Garp said this, he actually had some intention of probing. Because in Garp's view, it was very likely that the Marines on this island were not as disciplined as the soldiers at headquarters, and they might very well do some bad things, abusing their power to oppress civilians. Such things had actually happened at branch bases before. But Garp never imagined that the words he was about to hear would be so unforgettable to him. Chapter 19, Garp's shock. A few years ago, the Arlon pirates came to our Konomi Islands. In fact, before they even arrived, the people's lives were already very difficult. This was because the newly arrived Captain Nezumi of the Marine base demanded 80% of our income every year and sent men to blockade all routes out of the Konomi Islands. Not long after the villager began to speak, the veins on Garp's forehead were already bulging. As expected. There was a reason why he had felt such a strong sense of loathing the moment he first saw that man named Nezumi. This person. No, this creature who could no longer be called human was truly beyond wretched. No wonder these commoners were so terrified upon seeing the Marines. Vice Admiral Garp, I actually understand that the Marines need a lot of money to maintain justice on the seas. I was willing to give my income to the Marines. Although that period was very bitter, it was barely enough to survive. But all of that changed after Arlong and his crew established Arlong Park. Until 2 days ago, a few kind-hearted lords came to our Konomi Islands and killed the Arlong pirates for us. As for what exactly happened at Captain Nezumi's marine base? We aren't sure. Very quickly, Garp learned about everything that had happened on the Konomi Islands over the past few years from the villager's mouth. The adjutants standing beside Garp, as well as the surrounding Marines, all lowered their heads at this moment, their faces ashen. The veins on Garp's forehead were nearly bursting, and his entire body was trembling slightly, as if he were trying his best to suppress something. Garp could clearly feel that these commoners had already lost all trust in the Marines. It was only because his own reputation was quite large and he still held some level of trust in the East Blue that these people were willing to say a few words to him. Garp simply could not imagine what kind of terrifying things these people had experienced over the last few years. It turned out that the slaughtered village he had seen at the beginning actually had the handiwork of the Marines involved. And as for the mysterious powerhouses who had destroyed the Marine base, Garp could sense it. These commoners would absolutely not tell him. No, it should be said that they would absolutely not tell the Marines. Later, he could only dispatch a few clever confidants to disguise themselves and fish for information. Thinking of this, Garp felt a sense of stifled frustration. This was the first time he had felt somewhat ashamed of his identity as a marine. Especially when facing these commoners, he was known as the guardian deity of the East Blue, yet the people of the East Blue had been guarded into such a state. Old brother, rest assured. Such things will never happen again on the Konomi Islands. I, Garp, give you my word. Sai, whether you promise or not, if you're willing to let me go, I'll head back to my village now. Looking at that wary gaze, Garp felt very hurt and equally pained. Even after saying so much, the other party still harbored a deep-seated fear toward his identity as a marine. Garp could only try his best to show a gentle smile and invite the villagers to leave. After the villagers had left, Garp took several deep breaths before suppressing the rage in his heart. The adjutants and the marines following Garp were also beyond furious after hearing what the villagers had said. If that marine branch base still existed, they would probably have ground it into dust themselves, just like the mysterious powerhouses the villagers spoke of. You few, follow me to that so-called Arlong Park to take a look. Meanwhile, send a few clever ones to the nearby villages to scout for news, focusing on gathering information about those mysterious powerhouses. After Garp finished speaking, several soldiers immediately took their orders and left. He then personally led several adjutants to the location of Arlong Park that he had just learned from the villager. It seems these mysterious powerhouses are much more powerful than I imagined. Standing behind the collapsed walls of Arlong Park, Garp's eyes widened into circles as he looked at the scene before him. Because the island in front of him, the Arlong Park the villager spoke of, was truly too different from what he had imagined. Looking out from where he stood, it seemed as if the island before him had been directly erased by some terrifying power. Before his eyes was a massive hollow. The shape of this hollow was all too familiar to him. Vice Admiral Garp, this is a fist? The adjutant at his side was also wide-eyed with shock, feeling incredibly stunned by the scene before him. He had never seen such a terrifying sight before. It looked as if someone had thrown just a single punch and completely erased the island before them, this so-called Arlong Park. One punch to destroy an island. Even Vice Admiral Garp in front of him probably couldn't achieve that. Yes, this is a fist print. When Garp said this, even he didn't notice that his voice was now carrying a hint of a tremor. Because just now, Garp had made an estimate in his mind. Looking at the direction of this fist print and the remaining edges of the island, that person must have thrown a punch directly forward to produce such an effect. The way of the fist. Garp was very confident in himself. In this world, there were likely very few who could fight him using only their fists. He should be one of the strongest people in the world. But this fist print before him was far beyond what he could achieve. Furthermore, that power at the Marine Branch 16 base that could directly turn an entire base into dust was also extremely terrifying. This power was far beyond what Devil Fruit abilities could compare to. Garp could feel that this power was very pure. The opponent likely followed the same path as he did. They had achieved this level without relying on any additional external power. Now, Garp was truly interested in those mysterious powerhouses the villagers mentioned. When Garp first heard the villagers speak, he hadn't actually thought those mysterious powerhouses would be that strong. Overthrowing a Marine Branch base or destroying a pirate crew with a bounty of 20 million wasn't a particularly remarkable feat. Even the adjutants by his side could do it easily. But now, after arriving here personally and witnessing the scene before his eyes, Garp knew. These mysterious powerhouses might not just be strong in the eyes of ordinary villagers, but were powerhouses in the truest sense of the word. Chapter 20, a threat comparable to the 4 emperors on board the Doghead battleship. Garp's expression was cold and solemn. As he recalled everything that had happened today, he felt deeply shocked. In the East Blue. Garp truly considered this place his backyard. He also truly felt that nothing ever happened in the East Blue, far removed from what he considered the worst and filthiest side of the world. Here, even those pirates were pitifully weak. In Garp's eyes, they could only be considered cute little brats. Everything was just like children at play. Therefore, for all these years, Garp had always felt that he had governed the East Blue very well. With his deterrence, this East Blue was absolutely the quietest and most peaceful sea in the entire world. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called the weakest sea. But Garp truly had not expected this. In this weakest sea, in this most peaceful ocean where he was stationed, such terrible things were actually happening in secret. Even more unexpected was that there would be several such powerful mysterious experts here. To Garp, today's incident was not just as simple as a marine base being destroyed or a pirate crew being wiped out. More importantly, his perception from the past decade had been completely shattered. He never imagined that such experts existed in the East Blue, or that such bizarre methods existed. Vice Admiral Garp, Vice Admiral Garp. The person sent to gather information has returned. Oh. Bring him here quickly. Behind an adjutant. At this moment, a person disguised as a villager bowed respectfully to Garp and then arrived before him. Vice Admiral Garp, I have gathered intelligence regarding those 3 mysterious experts. Speak quickly. It is like this, Vice Admiral Garp. There are 3 mysterious experts in total according to the villagers. For 2 of them, I only managed to find out their appearance and attire. One is a handsome young man dressed somewhat strangely, and the other is a bald man wearing a yellow bodysuit. However, regarding the 3rd person, based on the villagers' descriptions, I can confirm that the person is likely my hawk, one of the Shichibukai. Hawkeye. Yes, based on the villagers' descriptions, I can confirm that the person is indeed Hawkeye. However, according to the villagers, both Hawkeye and the bald man seem to be subordinates of that handsome young man. Subordinates? Regarding his soldier's words, Garp was indeed somewhat skeptical. After all, he had interacted with Hawkeye and knew what a proud person he was. A man as proud as Hawkeye would likely refuse to join or become a subordinate, even if invited personally by one of the 4 emperors. Because Hawkeye's strength as the world's strongest swordsman speaks for itself. He is a character that even the 4 emperors and admirals have to treat seriously. Such a proud person is willing to stand behind that so-called handsome young man as a subordinate? Just this description made Garp realize that the punch mark on the Konomi Islands likely came from that handsome young man. As for that bald man, Sengoku. With a loud bang, Sengoku's office door was rudely kicked open by Garp, who then barged in. The moment he heard Garp's voice, Sengoku didn't hesitate to immediately launch into a tirade. You old geezer, how many times have I told you to knock before entering my office? Every time you come to my office, I have to replace the door. The money will be deducted from your salary. However, as Sengoku scolded him, he stopped. His expression was no longer playful, but had become serious. Because Garp's expression was currently extremely solemn. Previously, every time Garp came to his office, the two would bicker like 2 old children, and Garp would always be smiling, looking completely unserious. But today, Garp had none of his previous playful demeanor. His expression was exceptionally solemn and serious. Sengoku, something big might be about to happen. Should we call Tsuru over? Half an hour later. Inside Sengoku's office. Sengoku sat in the main seat, Garp sat in the first seat below, and opposite them sat a woman with gray hair. She wore her hair in a simple ponytail that reached her shoulders, pulled back to reveal her forehead, and wore a pair of emerald green earrings. She wore 2 gold bracelets on her right wrist, draped a Marine Vice Admiral's coat over her shoulders, and wore a light blue shirt underneath with a purple tie featuring white patterns. This woman was Tsuru, a Marine Headquarters Vice Admiral, known as the Great Staff Officer. She was a user of the Paramecia-type wash fruit, a marine admired by the soldiers. Since before the Great Pirate Era began, she had supported the Marines alongside Sengoku and Garp. She was an intelligent general with a wealth of experience and knowledge. The 3 people in the office were the 3 people with the highest prestige in the entire Marine headquarters. At this moment, in the office, only Garp's voice could be heard continuously. He was recounting what he had seen and heard on the Konomi Islands while sailing in the East Blue today. From beginning to end. He laid out all the evil deeds of Colonel Nezumi at the Marine Branch 16 base, and also revealed their collusion with the Arlong pirates, which had oppressed the people of the Konomi Islands for nearly a decade. When Garp got to this point, the expressions on the faces of the 2 old men were extremely ugly. However, immediately after, Garp then spoke of the marine base that had been reduced to a pile of dust, and that terrifying punch mark. Sengoku, two extremely mysterious experts have appeared in the East Blue. One of them is an existence capable of destroying half an island with a single punch. He should be an ultimate physical cultivator. As for the other person, he has a bizarre ability capable of turning an entire base into dust. Finally, Hawkeye is in the East Blue, and it seems he has become a partner to those two. Why would Hawkeye be in the East Blue? After Garp finished speaking, this was the first question that appeared in Sengoku's mind. Moreover, if someone like Hawkeye chose to join their group and become their partner, then, just these three people alone were enough to make the Marines prepare for a serious threat. Because the strength of this group was simply too strong. Those two mysterious experts. Sengoku racked his brains but couldn't think of anyone in his mind who fit the description Garp provided. Most importantly, the leader of these three was a handsome young man. A young man could subdue an existence of Hawkeye's level. Without a doubt, the danger level of this young man was incredibly high. He was absolutely an existence comparable to the four emperors. And yet, they didn't even know the name of such a person, nor where he came from. Thinking of this, Sengoku couldn't help but furrow his brows. That's it for today. Meet you in next part.